All right, good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order regular council meeting number 1547 for October 19th. And in honor of the Liwatuo, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Liwat Nation. Members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Are there any amendments to the agenda? None. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councilor Kraddick, seconded by Councilor Zand. Any opposed? Motion carries. Rise with the report. We have none. Adoption of minutes from regular council meeting 1546 from Tuesday, October 5th. Moved by Councilor Zand, seconded by Councilor Antonelli. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising? None. Business arising from committee of the whole. Meeting minutes, delegations takes us all the way to number 9. So we're on staff reports, Office of the CAO, CAO Gilmore.
I do not have anything to report this morning.
Ah, there you go. Motion to adjourn.
I guess so.
Okay. Corporate Legislative Services 2022 council meeting schedule. Ms. Fraser.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me. Councillor Noble, I'm sorry if I have my back to you. So I am presenting for Council's consideration the 2022 council meeting schedule. And this is for the regular council meetings. Pursuant to section 127 1B of the Community Charter and section 6B of the Village of Pemberton Procedure Bylaw, the village must make available prior to January 1st the council meeting schedule for the upcoming year. And we also must provide notice subject to section 94, which requires us to advertise twice, but we have to advertise before the end of the year and then the beginning of the year. The council meeting schedule for 2022 must be determined by resolution. Our council procedure bylaw provides us with flexibility each year, as we used to formally have it council meetings the first and third Tuesday of the month. But what we council did a number of years ago was adjust it and just make it on a Tuesday to provide flexibility, because we were finding that as we had other obligations, we were needed to move meetings on occasion. So the meeting schedule that's been presented, proposed for council's consideration, takes into consideration the Union of British Columbia Municipalities Conference, the Lower Mainland Local Government Association meetings, which council usually likes to attend in some form. It also considers activities that are busy time for both council and staff from an operational perspective, such as statutory holidays when the office is closed, as well as vacation periods, Christmas and March break. In 2017, council established that the first meeting of the month be held at 5:30 p.m. and the second meeting of the month be held at 9 a.m. And this has remained the same over for the last number of years and is being proposed again for this for 2022. So when looking at the 2022 meeting calendar, staff took into consideration the statutory holidays, which are identified in yellow on the proposed schedule. It considers March break and Christmas break, which are identified in green. Green, and LM, LGA, and UBCM, which are identified in sort of the orangey brown. The proposed schedule considers the timing of municipal elections, because those are coming up this year in 2022. They will be held on October 15th. And we have advanced voting we offer 2 opportunities for advanced voting with the hope that we will have as many eligible electors come out and vote by providing as many opportunities as we possibly can. And it also takes into account the inaugural meeting, which is held for the swearing in of new council, which is on November 1st. And that is a requirement of our bylaw. The first Tuesday of November is when the inaugural meeting is held pursuant to our procedure bylaw. So with all of that into consideration, the schedule before you has 1 meeting identified in January, March, May, July, September, and December. 2 meetings in February, April, June, July, October, and November, with no meeting in August. And council will note that staff has proposed a bit of a change for the summer, and is recommending only 1 meeting in July. And part of the rationale for that is that we are finding it very challenging to accommodate summer vacations in a 4-week period in August. And we wanted to offer the opportunity to have a bit more time over the summer months to accommodate vacations, not only for staff, but also for council, because we know that people are busy and windows are getting shorter and shorter as time goes by. So, but always, in the case of an emergency, council does have the ability to schedule an emergency meeting, a special meeting, either by using notice or by within 24 hours and not calling on note and waiving notice. There is also the opportunity going forward, if council decides that they want to have another regular council meeting, that they can do that by resolution as we go through the year. In terms of committee of the whole and in camera or closed meetings, there's no requirement to set the schedule. We have traditionally here at the Village of Pemberton held those meetings as part of a regular council meeting day. And we've adjusted the times depending on council's availability and how the day proceeds. We've also, in this schedule, which is a bit different, is identified 3 potential committee of the whole days that we're sort of saving for budget deliberations, because we generally do budget discussions at committee of the whole. So March 1st, 29th, and April 12th are identified as potential days for committee of the whole. So those would be shorter meetings, just one item only. We wouldn't put other discussion items on the agenda. They would be facilitated through committee of the whole and just for those specific for budget deliberations if they are required. But we wanted to flag that for council, and we again kept them on Tuesdays so that if because we know that council tends to keep Tuesdays open, and we try to keep it on that day. So before you is the proposed schedule, and we're looking for, or if you have any questions, please ask.
Thank you, Ms. Fraser. Questions?
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks, Ms. Fraser. It's really well laid out. It's nice to see the graph with everything on it. It's really, if I have one issue, it's from July to September being a 2-month period without it's just over a 2-month period without a council meeting. Knowing full well we can call a special one, but the one in July 12th, would it be much of a problem if we move that forward a week or something?
Like later a week?
Yeah, I'm sorry, later a week.
So that it's not as big a gap between.
Yeah, so maybe it's the 19th or 26th. That would be my only suggestion. And I'm willing to go with council says. I understand the issue for staff. And if it's a big issue for staff, then I'm fine with it. But it's just a 2-month gap. I don't know who I'd talk to in that period of time.
Get up to a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
That I had similar thoughts. That does seem like a big gap, and I also had the same thought about we can call a special meeting if there is business to look after. It does seem like a big gap. And question about May, how come only the 1 meeting in May?
We had LMLGA
The first week.
the first week,
Right.
and and because of the April meeting, the Easter long weekend tends to create challenges for us, because not only is the Friday a stat, but the Monday is a stat. And so part of the reason is that the April 26th meeting, we could try to do a meeting on the 3rd, but that gives us not even a week between meetings.
Right.
And then the 10th meeting, we thought if council had been at LGMA, they may not, you may be sort of doing the post-conference thing, depending on how many people attend. I know that generally it's been 1 or 2 people attending. Certainly in the past couple of years with the virtual meetings, it's been a lot easier. But I don't know if they're gonna plan to go back to in-person meetings
Yeah.
next May.
I think the one thing too, if we were to add on the 31st, then we're doing week by week, then it's the 7th of June. So there's no turnaround, there's no week in between. So that's why that was sort of picked. It could end up being a double if we do the 3rd of May and a double if we schedule something on the 31st. So
Yeah.
I see the 10th and 24th, but that's also on
And-
a weekend.
exactly.
So we just trying.
And I figured it was stuff like that, and I'm similar to Councillor Craddock. I'm good with most of it. I was concerned there was a number of months that only had one meeting in the big summer gap. Again, recognizing that we can take care of business if we need to. But it did kind of flag with me a little bit that we had more than the usual amount of months with one meeting and a longer gap, so I'm not sure how.
Thanks for some clarity.
Yeah, go
How
ahead.
many more months did we have? That had more than 1 month, one meeting, or last year, this year, how many do we have that had one meeting month? Was it an extra 2 months or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah,
that?
we had in March, September, December, and May this year.
That didn't have, that had one meeting.
One meeting.
And we have 6 this year, we
Yeah.
proposed.
This year's 6 and
Yes,
6.
it's, yeah.
2 more.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm throwing it out there, I'm not saying I'm against it, I just want to make sure that we're available and ready to do our jobs as needed. Any other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
Similar to Councilor Craddock and Mayor Richmond, it was just to bring it all together. I was concerned with the fact there were so many meetings that had one meeting a month. And then knowing that we can call a special meeting, I just want to make sure I understand the staff made this schedule, so obviously you're comfortable with it, but it is the concern I have. There would be a lot of business for staff to put on the agenda to prepare for us in those months that have one meeting a month. So my concern is just that it would be overload for staff. Now, I know
would
that
say there's
you
no
guys made the schedule, so I assume that you're fine with it, but I do share the same concerns that having one meeting a month may be an overload, but like I said,
I
that's,
think it's probably actually easier for staff.
Is it?
That's what they're trying not to say there.
Okay.
I'll say it for them.
right.
It's easier
That was my
for staff to have less meetings because preparing for the meetings is a lot of work.
yeah,
And then the
Okay.
follow-up of the meetings and,
right. Okay.
but that's not the reason that we've selected this. And there really is no
No.
more work if there's one meeting in the month or there's, I mean, as far as preparing for the meeting, there may be a few more reports that we're having to do, but hopefully that would allow staff to have more time to get those reports ready.
It would definitely mean some longer meetings. Well, we've also seen some meetings where because of schedule, because this summer there was so much staff away on holiday, the July meeting, it was very small.
Yeah.
Right, so a lot of that business can be taken care of elsewhere.
And we just have a number of items that are coming forward over the next year that if we're trying to rush to get them onto an agenda, they may end up getting pulled. And so by having a little bit more time between meetings, it actually provides staff more opportunity to get those reports completed so that they can come forward in a bit more of a timely manner than if we are trying to juggle between meetings. So it's just something that is in the last I think couple of months we've had to pull some items just because they're just not ready because staff hasn't had time to be able to put to it. So
I mean, I think maybe, and speaking for myself, not the rest of council, still open to comments and questions for myself. Having heard responses, I guess I would be supportive of the calendar with the, not caveat, but the comment that I don't want to see projects or residence projects held up because we're not in meetings. So I would be prepared to call those special meetings to advance, I'll just use an example. The French school trying to meet timelines or whatever it might be. So I will be as we go through, the year, if things are coming up, be it a project that's initiated by the village or something coming to us from residents or developers, whatever it is, I will be inclined to call that meeting, even if it's just to deal with that item of business. So as long as staff understand that's the way, that's my biggest concern, is to make sure we don't slow anything down. If there's anything that's getting slowed down by having a meeting or two less, then I would like us to be very aware that we will call special meeting.
And we do understand that. In fact, when we're talking with individuals who have applications in, we often look and target out. We say, these are the meetings we have, where are we going to work to, and work with the applicant on that. So we always make sure that we're having those conversations. And if we realize that obviously someone needs something a little bit earlier and we only have a 1 meeting month, we're happy to bring that up and try to call those special meetings.
Okay. As long as we're having that ongoing conversation between those meetings. Any other thoughts or comments? Are you good?
No, that was my main concern too, was holding things up.
Do we want to look at moving the July date? Is that reasonable for staff? Does that interfere with holidays? We're moving it a little bit later. So we have our second meeting in June is the 21st. So if we held the July 19th instead.
We can just go with this for this year, see how it works out
Again, with the ability to
and
call
balance it
meetings.
next year, because I agree with the mayor that anything that comes up that has to be dealt with, that's what we're here for. We'll just call it a special meeting, so.
Yeah, as we put it proposed, it was to allow a little bit more time so that we could get
Yeah.
all of the vacations. Having said that, I think last year, well, we had this year we had the 31st, but in many other years, we've often called special meetings in August anyway, when we have
Yeah.
something that's urgent.
It's been rare that we haven't.
It's been great. I mean, this year we didn't, but we had that last week of August anyway. Again, it wasn't a very full agenda.
Okay, well, if everybody's comfortable with it, let's leave it as staff is presented, and on that July 12th meeting, let's, as part of the agenda, let's make sure we're looking at 6 weeks ahead and talking about whether anything needs to be dealt with and discussed in between.
So I'll move the recommendation, we accept the agenda as presented.
Further discussion? Call the question, any opposed? Motion carries. Awesome, thanks, Sheena. We're on to 9C, Development Services. So we're gonna wait for some staff to join us. The fan sounds like, I keep thinking it's raining. That's what it sounds like.
What is it?
The fan, is that what I'm hearing? It's the fan over here. It sounds like rain.
I think
behind me.
Is the tap dripping, isn't it?
No, I hear some.
I don't think the fan's
some
on.
back.
Is it?
Not that-
It's not on.
No, I hear some sort of back.
It's very quiet in here. Do you find? Like, very quiet. Not used to this.
We could get the garbage truck from the.
Maybe. We get some kids, like
I'd say.
kids running around outside and, doors
Garbage truck will
slamming. and-
come.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Cutting a tree down out front later on, so that's.
Good morning.
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 I'm just waiting for Shannon Gordon to
Yeah.
also be
Yes,
upgraded.
Ms. Fraser, could you try to promote Shannon Gordon? It's not working from my side.
Okay. Oh, should I?
Oh, is she there now? No.
I'll try again. Yeah, tried.
Just text her as well. She's on the line. Or she should be on the Zoom.
We're
She
just
said,
having problems promoting her.
sure, nothing's coming up for her at this point.
No, she's on as an attendee, but we're not able to promote her to panelist.
I try.
Maybe could she try leaving and coming back and see?
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
There we go.
All right.
Didn't hit the Button hard enough, I
Oh.
guess.
Okay.
Well,
Ms.
good.
Gordon, are you joining us on video, or can you hear us?
Okay. Shannon, if you want to turn your video on, that would be
Right.
great. But I'll start. So good morning, Mayor and Council. So the purpose of this report is to present the completed Sea to Sky, its food recovery strategy and action plan for council to receive, and also to seek council's support for continued collaboration among Sea to Sky businesses, organizations, and member municipalities for this initiative. So council may recall that in February of 2020, you received correspondence from the Whistler Center for Sustainability, which is now referred to as WCS Planning and Engagement, seeking the village's support for an initiative aimed at developing a regional food recovery and distribution strategy or system, that would help reduce food waste and meet our regional zero waste goals. The letter also requested at that time for council to pass a resolution to support the Resort Municipality of Whistler grant funding application to UBCM. So which council passed at their regular meeting number 1509. So having been successful in receiving the funding, the RMOW hired WCS to lead the project, and I participated as a task force member. So the project consisted of research, outreach, and collaborative meetings with businesses such as grocery stores and food organizations such as food banks, as well as member municipalities and some other nonprofits, to basically seek ways that we can all reduce food waste and at the same time ensure that we're recovering as much food as possible. Looks like Shannon might be having some difficulty.
Yes.
I was going to turn it over to her because she's prepared a PowerPoint.
Lisa, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
You can hear me. Okay, great. Yeah, I don't know what my camera for some reason is. My rear camera is working. This has never happened to me before. My rear.
Well, I think once you share your screen, we should be good. Anyways, I was going to turn it over to you to present a PowerPoint that would go through a bit more detail on the initiative itself. And then I was going to speak again to basically, you're calling me now, Shannon. Are you there? Anyways, if we can't have the PowerPoint today, then I'll just continue with my report. So, Shannon, were you able to share your screen?
I think she maybe wanted to talk to you. That's why she was calling.
Mhm.
Oh,
Okay.
she's gone now. So we actually have the PowerPoint. I don't know if she can speak and we could fast forward through it or.
Okay, her laptop just crashed. That is very
So,
unfortunate. Yeah, if you wanted to upload the
There should be a call
PowerPoint.
number for the Zoom, all right? She should be able to call, if she could call in on her phone.
Yeah,
there's a
okay.
call number for the Zoom and then we'll put the PowerPoint.
Okay, but just give me 1 second.
Yeah,
Okay.
My
so
apologies.
Gwendolyn,
Gwendolyn
any chance?
will need to find the PowerPoint.
it's all good. Ted does this all the time.
Oh, it is.
Do you want me to,
Do you want me to plug something in?
do you want me to share it with Gwendolyn?
Yeah, it's in the- yeah, do you want to, are you able to send it?
Yeah.
So we're back to Zoom meetings for the next 2-3 months at the board again, because our cameras and stuff aren't ready and directors wanted to be able to Zoom live. And we can't do the hybrid yet, so it's all or nothing.
We are recording.
No, I'm not saying anything, and it's not public.
Yeah. Well, I think the staff has done a good job setting this
This
up.
is great.
Yeah, this
It's
is,
a little bit, there's 12 of us plus in that room.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's a little bit, they need a little more,
360 kind of thing.
yeah. But no, I think this is great.
I'm just wondering when we're gonna get our makeup people in.
It's lighting and makeup.
I need lots.
I got some friends at Vancouver Film Studios.
Okay, I think I'll just continue to present my report, and whether or not we get to the PowerPoint remains to be seen here. So Shannon's working very diligently on her end. We'll see if you can join us. I've texted her to join us by phone.
There's Padrini, she's back in.
Oh, okay, excellent. I don't see her on the screen.
Okay, I just promoted her.
Okay,
There we go.
Ms. Gordon, can you hear us? Oh, we can see you. Hi.
Although you're on mute.
I apologize. That was not the smoothest start. I love that I have technical glitches right in that moment. I had the full blue screen of death on my end. Thank you for your patience, and I apologize for the delay.
Not a problem at all. It's not a good
Okay.
day if there's no tech trouble. Welcome. Good morning. Take your time. We're ready when you are.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just get my screen set up and share with you. Just give me 1 sec to get this. Okay, and then share. And if for some reason, this is a new laptop, so I'm surprised I'm having issues, but if for some reason I have issues again, so that there's less of a delay, Lisa, maybe just send me the phone number if there's a number I should call in on, so that I don't have to sort of redo this and keep you waiting. Okay, I think we're ready to go though. So thank you for allowing me to present. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Just a couple of things before I start. This project was really a team effort for sure. And I came on a little later in the project after a lot of the research was done. So I'm going to take you through findings pretty quickly and at a high level. I may not be able to answer all of your questions at the end, but if I can't, I will endeavor to get answers to you and ask my colleagues who did the bulk of the research. Diving in, and Lisa covered a little bit of this, sort of where this came from. The focus really was on improving food recovery and redistribution in the corridor. The focus was from Squamish to Lillooet. And we were able to access the UBCM Poverty Reduction Grant. So thank you for your support in that application. And we will certainly be watching for that funding to come again to further the work and continue moving some of the actions forward. And I'll introduce you to those at the end. So project goals. We wanted to understand, what's going on in the region in terms of the food surplus food that's moving through the system and where the opportunities are for recovery. We also needed to get a handle on some of the distribution models. So the food banks, the food programs, what is being delivered, what are the services being delivered and the volumes, et cetera. We did a scan of best practices to inform the strategies and the actions. So a bunch of research to understand needs and supply. And then we went into essentially action planning informed by all of that data and input from stakeholders. With the intention, obviously, to, as I mentioned, the overall objective was to improve food recovery and redistribution, but also, to ultimately as well reduce food waste, and the climate benefits that has as well. So there were a number of objectives that were being addressed by this project. This is just an overview of the process and the timeline that we went through. Hopefully it's a bit small. Hopefully you can see it, but 3 phases. The first 2 phases were really the research pieces. So getting an understanding of the profile in the region, who has need for this, for access to lower cost food. Who are those individuals and those groups? Where's the supply coming from? And then, as I mentioned, that research and those discussions, including surveys and interviews and a bunch of things, went into the strategy development in phase 3. So as I mentioned, this will be quick. So the key findings, what we learned about sort of socioeconomic aspects in the region. So low income ranges from about 5 to 11% of the population, higher in Whistler, which is on par with the rest of BC at 11% low income. You can see the variation between the communities in our corridor. The cost of food, we're not that much higher than the rest of BC. So for our area, we are at, and we were able to localize it a little bit more. This map shows Vancouver Coastal Health area at 1,056 for a month's basket of food for a family of 4. In fact, our area was a little bit, we were able to sort of localize that data a little bit more, and we're at about 1,038. So a little bit lower than the rest of the Vancouver Coastal Health area, and just a little bit higher than the rest of BC. So not that big a difference. What we did learn, though, is that certainly there is a food insecurity in our region. About 5% overall are food insecure. This has probably increased. The 5% data is 2013, so that has probably increased certainly during COVID. Youth are more at risk, with 7% going to bed, reporting going to bed hungry, and we're not having food in the morning for breakfast. And then Indigenous peoples are even higher in terms of being food insecure at 22%. So certainly some challenges in our area and need. This will come as no surprise to you. We have a lot of farms in our region, with the bulk of them in electoral area C. And you'll have a much better understanding of that. So that's just an overview of what the farms, how they're providing food, how they're supplying food out into the region. Just a quick overview. Food here, an overview of the food industry. So restaurants and grocers. Restaurants. Obviously hotels, restaurants within hotels, and grocers. So, and there are, the bulk of these obviously, and not surprisingly, are in Whistler and Squamish. Number of premises is higher, just means that, sometimes you can have one entity that has multiple premises. So, as an example, Whistler Blackcomb as one entity has, 30 or so premises. So that's why those numbers are a little bit different. So that's just an overview of where the majority of that supply comes from. A quick look at the food programs offered in the corridor. So there are 3 main food bank locations. One in Whistler, offered by Whistler Community Services Society. One in Squamish Helping Hands, in their new facility under one roof, and they have a market. In fact, both offer a bit of a market offering where people can come in and select their food. I actually don't know the model in Pemberton. Some of you may be more familiar, or probably more familiar with it than I, but Sea to Sky Community Services operates the Pemberton Food Bank, which typically services Lewat and Lower Statliam communities, except during COVID, when a temporary facility was established. So the Lewat Food Bank was established during COVID by Sea to Sky Community Services, and I think there are talks about extending that. And then Southern Statliam Health Society also offers some access to food, but not a permanent food bank. So 3 main entities or locations, and a temporary one with the hope that it continues. Food program clients, a quick overview. So these are the 3 main locations and the number of visits roughly or on average per week, and a bit of a look at the breakdown of people being served. Lots of singles. Whistler also services some residents from Pemberton and Mount Currie. Lots of singles, and then lots of children as well, certainly being served here in Whistler. So that's an overview there. Seasonal demand. So the demand, it's interesting that the demand, and I think there's opportunity to better maybe connect the food banks during, you know, the ups and downs of the demand that happen seasonally. So Whistler has a greater demand spring and fall and in shoulder seasons. And then Squamish higher demand in summertime generally. And then wintertime, Pemberton, Leewat, especially in December. So now just recoverable food, you know, that's essentially recoverable food that is not sellable, but is still edible. You know, so there's a certain point at which food has to go into the compost. But before that, there is opportunity to recover. And the guidelines around that, the provincial guidelines around that are, they're you know, well articulated in a guide, but getting that information out is sort of a continuous process and clarifying what's recoverable. And really the food banks, what they hope is that the donation, like the organizations or whether restaurants, grocers making the donations, they're ideally hoping to get the donations, and then they're happy to sort of go through the guidelines and look at the dates and make those decisions. And they just want to get that supply coming to them as much as possible. Of course, not receiving things that are clearly past due and you know, spoiling, but so yeah, and it really does happen through the production, you know, process from production to consumption. I'll talk a little bit more about what happens through the process and where the biggest opportunities for recovery are. This is sort of a little bit, the numbers are a little bit tough to understand, but essentially what this is saying is there is a large potential for recovery. There is a lot of food going into ideally the, you know, compost stream, but in some cases landfills still. So there is a large potential. Some is more donatable than others. So recovery, you know, can mean, like in a household, recovery means households actually using it better, you know, utilizing food better, more completely before it goes into the waste stream, which is not always donatable. So I'll cover where those opportunities are in this slide. So this shows production to, you know, processing, distribution, retail, into households and into HRIs, hotels, restaurants, and institutions. So, and then the color coding shows sort of small to high opportunity for recovery. So red is smaller, is not a big opportunity as far as the data shows. And green is bigger opportunity for recovery and donation. So as I was starting to talk about is, you know, once food is in households, it's the bigger opportunity to reduce waste there is really to educate households about how to better utilize food before it ends up in the garbage or in the compost, rather than, you know, into the donation, like to the food banks and to the food programs. The biggest opportunity certainly is with retail and grocers, and a lot of donation is happening there. That's really where the bulk of the food banks and food programs, or FDOs, get their food, is from retail and grocers. And then the other green area there, the hotel, restaurants, and institutions, there is a good, like there's lots of food recovery that is opportunity that exists. But the trick is that a lot of it, once it's guest facing, it really become like it really can't sort of go to food banks and be donated. So that's a trickier one. That's a trickier one for sure, that we're sort of exploring. But this anyway, so the biggest opportunity really is retail and grocers. There is some opportunity from some of the large suppliers that supply to hotel, restaurants, and institutions in bulk. Sometimes the wrong orders land in the restaurants, by some of our large suppliers, and those are opportunities to get some of that bulk food, if it's not needed, into the donation stream to the food banks. So this is just an overview of the types this is focused on hotels and restaurants, and where their recoverable food is across the food types. So the largest majority being in the produce and breads. Annual spending. So it's interesting. We did a survey of food bank clients, and really their food needs are being met. The majority of food bank clients, when we surveyed them in Squamish, Whistler, and Pemberton, their food needs are being met at the food banks. And then we went back and confirmed, but in order to do so, the food banks are purchasing food in order to meet the gap between what's donated and what clients need. So, and obviously, as you can see here, the spending ramped up through COVID. And continues to be higher than it was pre-COVID. So we'll see, ultimately where that lands. But that's a significant amount being spent to provide what's needed. So ideally, we're closing the gap there and meeting more of that by donations as we move forward, so that money can be spent elsewhere. So in sort of summary, when we looked back at all of the data, and the surveys and the interviews, and we tried to sort of distill it down. Okay, what did we learn? So we learned all food banks need to purchase food to meet clients' needs. I just covered that. There are likely more people who need access to more affordable food than are accessing it at the food bank. So our sense is that there are some additional barriers to accessing food, and whether that's transportation challenges, especially for remote communities, which is also part of the next point, but also barriers around, the stigma of accessing food this way, discomfort, yes, and then just whether it's scheduling challenges or whatever. So trying to get a better sense of that is a next step. Remote communities face additional challenges. They don't have food banks in their locations, transporting food to them, dropping it off. The delivery model is even challenging with whether it's wildlife or whatnot. So that's even more challenging for remote communities. Some food waste is inevitable. We learned that some is going to happen and is unavoidable, especially from hotels, restaurants, and institutions. The recovery potential there is going to be more challenging. And then all the way through the system, building capacity to increase recovery and redistribution is still needed. So there's still, whether it's awareness, information barriers, infrastructure support that's needed. So just generally, how do we support the system? Better all the way through. So with those sort of summary takeaways in mind, we were able to sort of devise a bit of a focus the strategies and actions. So initial action planning with the task force identified a whole bunch of actions, and then we were able to, through a review, refinement, ground truthing process, distill it down into a set of 5 strategies and then a set of actions as well. So the 5 strategies link back to the key findings I just took you through. So obviously the first is secure additional recovered food, right? So that food banks aren't having to spend dollars on meeting client needs. So finding those additional sources for donations to meet those needs. And one of the things is establishing more cold storage space at the food bank locations. Sometimes there's food available and they have nowhere to store it, especially the perishable stuff. So for instance, Whistler through COVID, as needs ramped up, they established a cold storage, a mobile cold storage space outside of their location. Removing barriers to accessing food programs. So again, this addressing this item where likely more people have need. So in some cases that'll be the home deliveries to address transportation challenges, and in other areas it might be understanding who those additional people are, like, and understanding what their barriers are, and then trying to figure out how to overcome that, so more people who need it are accessing food in a way that's comfortable to them. They're working with remote communities. This is something our focus really was, even though it was broad in terms of sort of the geographic scope, and a lot of our data captured or input from remote communities, ultimately our focus was on the municipalities in the region. So there's more work to do to understand the remote community needs, especially the remote Indigenous communities needs. And working with them if that's something that they determine is needed, to better understand how those linkages can be made. And then for the unavoidable food waste, how do we just reduce and divert that even more? So sometimes it's increasing the upselling of food. Sometimes that's just going to be, increasing awareness around the composting streams, et cetera. And then lastly is overall capacity. So one of the things that we found is that metrics are not, gathering the data was tricky. So we talked a lot about systems, putting measurement systems in and communication systems, like a universal measurement system, a universal communication system, but that was going to be too cumbersome. And what we decided is just if we could have everybody agree on the metrics to track and the units, and just simplifying so that when the data comes together, it's easier to benchmark and compare. So that was one of the things that came out of it. And then just training, and keeping obviously with turnover, but keeping that the people's understanding of what's recoverable and how to donate and all that stuff. So training, awareness, communication is an ongoing piece as well. Next steps, more some community presentations that we've presented to Whistler, and then Squamish is next. Squamish is staff are doing a presentation, and then I'll be presenting to the SLRD board next week, I think. And then we have some additional budget left over from the UBCM grant, so we're going to work to carry on some of the actions, certainly moving the recommended actions out to lead organizations, but also taking on some additional action pieces ourselves and moving some of those forward. And then we'll be watching, as I mentioned, future funding opportunities to carry on the work after this. So that's it for me. I'll turn it back over to Lisa. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shannon.
My pleasure.
Did you want to close your screen?
Yes.
Stop sharing your screen.
I will figure that out. Find the button. Oh, sorry, just a sec.
So basically at this point, as I mentioned, we are looking for council's support for this continued collaboration. In terms of the strategies that are relevant to the village, I have put forward a table in my report, which summarizes the specific recommended actions that were assigned to local governments. So while nothing is specifically or uniquely expected of the village of Pemberton, we are expected as local governments to be the lead organization on a few select strategies and actions. So one of those is to increase or improve access to certified commercial kitchen space that is large enough to accommodate food donations and processing preservation. The Pemberton Community Center does have a commercial kitchen, but it isn't of a size that is actually conducive to doing a lot of processing. So in future, if the village were to consider including a community kitchen in any of its spaces, so you should take into account that access and ample space would be of benefit. And as I understand, the Sea to Sky Community Services food bank may need to relocate in the near future. So if that comes forward to the village as part of a development application, I just would want you to consider some of the recommended actions as part of this plan when we're in order to create a larger community food hub or a center in Pemberton that has good access. And so another action that has been directed to local governments is to improve the understanding of those needed but not able to access food programs. So we basically could just educate ourselves based on the findings of this report. And again, consider transportation challenges, privacy and safety issues when making land use decisions that could house a future food bank or food program. Another one was encouraging a take-home culture in eating establishments or wherever food might be prepared and available for the community at large. So, if the village is involved in an event, or if, we're serving food at an open house or something, just to encourage people to take home leftovers, I think is all I need to say there. The next one would be to secure food waste that cannot be donated to food distribution organization to feed farm animals and or pets. And I really felt that this action would be best taken by the SLRD, who is responsible for solid waste and resource management for the village. So not a lot of direct responsibility for the Village of Pemberton for that one. The next one would be something you might want to take into account when it's time to do budget deliberations, and that would be the action to fund or hire someone to coordinate and monitor the implementation of the food recovery strategy and action plan. So as mentioned, this has been assigned to local governments and the SLRD, so it could be some kind of a joint funding that could possibly be taken into account when you're doing budgets. Next action would be to advocate that the provincial Clean BC program and grants include food recovery as a methane reduction strategy. So in conjunction with the SLRD and other member municipalities, there could be some joint correspondence sent from the Sea to Sky collaboration to support this recommendation. And so in terms of advocacy to Clean BC. And the last two actions I've actually lumped together. So basically to include food security and recovery in community policies and plans. Example, in our greenhouse gas reduction targets in our official community plan, and to ensure that they are implemented, and to update any relevant policies to include recovery of surplus food where possible. So as per Council's recent direction regarding a revised regional context statement, the OCP planner will include food recovery content in both the OCP and the Community Climate Action Plan and any other relevant policies moving forward. So at this point in time, staff would just make the recommendation that Council receives the Sea to Sky Food Recovery Strategy and Action Plan report, and that the Village of Pemberton continue to support the village's participation in regional collaboration around food waste reduction and zero waste. And that Council directs staff to include relevant information and actions from the Sea to Sky Food Recovery Strategy and Action Plan in any relevant policy work, such as the OCP and the Community Climate Action Plan. So thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you had any.
Thank you so much. I just out of instinct reached for my mute button. I was mute myself. Thank you, Ms. Pedrini. Thank you, Ms. Gordon, for the presentation and the report. I thought it was a really good read, and there's lots to talk about in there and consider. So I'll open up for questions and thoughts from council. Question, go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Pedrini. I appreciate the report. My comment or question is, when in strategy 1 action 4, improve access to certified commercial kitchen space that is large enough to accommodate food donations. I guess my only question was there is if, and I Are there areas within the Pemberton, the village of Pemberton, such as I mean, you've noted the community center's kitchen is not sized to consider for processing, but when we speak about processing the food, in my mind, this was in regards to making the food for people that need it. So like, for lack of a better term, a soup kitchen. Is that kind of what you were getting at when it comes to, say, making food for people? Or is it just more storing it so it doesn't go, bad?
I think it's both. So in my conversations with the food bank staff, I understand that they both require more space to store food and as well to use some of the food ingredients to, bake or make some kind of a meal, a casserole, a soup, etc. And that the space for doing that kind of processing is really limited. So if we, if Sea to Sky Community Services does have the ability to find a new location, I'm sure that they will be looking at, having as much space as possible for both cold storage, dry storage, as well as some secondary processing.
Yeah. So my only comment, but what my question was though, is that if staff have considered, I know you guys consider a lot, but just if staff have considered speaking with School District 48, because if I remember correctly, Signal Hill has a kitchen. Community Center has a kitchen. I'm not sure about Pemberton Secondary, if they have a kitchen. The Legion has a kitchen. And just for processing food, they're unfortunately, they're in different spots, but you put those four together and you may have something that could work a little bit better, albeit spread out. It's just a thought. That's all I had for questions, but that was a fantastic report. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You got something on your mind.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
That's a great suggestion. Thank you, Councillor Zant.
Yeah. Part of what we heard with multiple smaller kitchens and when it's not dedicated is the time and resources to continually move supplies in, move supplies out, so ultimately, because it's it's really a constant process of processing, this food and getting it ready, as it comes in bulk donations, getting it ready to either preserve, and store or give out in some form. So it's a pretty constant process, and that the need to sort of move it between locations becomes really a real barrier. The other thing that I think was interesting that we heard is the need in Pemberton by a lot of farmers that are also processing or producing food to have access to a big kitchen as well. So there could be a dual purpose there, is use by food banks, but also potentially by farmers for, that bigger location and more dedicated space. So certainly you're right, there are multiple smaller kitchens, but tricky for the food banks to use those with limited resources.
Thank you.
Shannon, along those lines, obviously you've talked and worked with Sea to Sky Community Services in preparing your report and putting your action plan together. I don't know how recently or how much you've talked to them. They now have some funding to look at a Pemberton regional food hub. And that work is not just started, but it's fairly early stages, and to me tie in 100% to the work that you guys are looking at for us. So, it's food hub, it's processing, it's storage, it's to support farmers as well as food recovery and local food supply. So
right.
What are your recent conversations with them about that?
Yes, and we did have some connections and some involvement with some people that are involved in that. We're on the task force, so I'm not super familiar with what's planned, but it's certainly, you're right, that will address a lot of I think a lot of what's needed, and is a really critical element to this. So yeah, I think it's exciting, and certainly linkages between what the objectives are with this.
Yeah, and I think the timing is good on that because, like I said, there's just so much synergy or overlap on the two projects, and Hopefully there's I know when I spoke to one of the contractors for Sea to Sky Community Services on that, it was fairly early going and he wasn't entirely aware of all the other initiatives that were going on, you know, whether it's, you know, our goal to build an agricultural park, whether it's the work you're doing. So I think that we need to connect some of those, some of that work.
Dawn Johnson was on the team, and Shannon Didier, who are quite familiar with the Food Hub project.
Great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Councilor Scott.
Yeah, thanks very much for the report. One thing reading through there, I don't see a real strong emphasis on educating residents on what food products can be utilized. And I guess from my perspective, I find I don't have any garbage at the end of the month. I compost or recycle everything. So I guess for me reading through there, I didn't see anything there that said, okay, save your broccoli ends or don't throw out that can that's dented. And so how does the ordinary person understand what can be utilized rather than look at it and say, well, the orange is bruised, I don't want to eat it, so I'm just going to throw it out. So I was looking for that education part of it and reading through your report, which is well done. I didn't see anything where I think the local person at home understands what they can help out with.
You know, and that's a good point. So I'll just connect you to strategy 5, number 24, is that Love Food Hate Waste campaign. It's actually supported nationally, like it's a national campaign that communities can actually tap into, and, you know, resources and messaging and templates. And so that's something that the RMOW has delivered in previous years and is planning to do again. So in fact, and we didn't put this down for the other local governments, but it is something that you could, that you actually could tap into as far as, you know, an educational campaign for residents.
Okay, thank you.
So that's what that plans, yeah.
Any questions or thoughts?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a question first. So I know that over the past couple of years, I feel food banks have really been asking for dollars as opposed to food. And that may, in some of the graphs you had, you definitely saw an increase in purchasing.
Right.
So where do we find that balance? Is it if people are contributing the right amount, the right kinds of foods, then maybe they wouldn't have to purchase. But like for me, I'm going, they just say, give me money and we'll go buy it. So we have the right stuff.
Right. Yes. And you're right. The dollars that, like the amount or what they purchase is sometimes there are specific needs that just aren't coming in through food donations. It's just not, you know, being delivered, whether it's grocery stores or whatever, they do, there's some amount, I would imagine, that will always need to be purchased to fill what isn't donated, you know, and the types that are required. So I think there is a balance there. I don't think the idea is to get to zero purchase, you know, $0 in terms of the purchases they do. But you're right. I think what you're saying though is, you know, if we could be clearer on what's needed as far as the donation food types, then that could maybe address some of the dollars spent as well.
My understanding is that the dollars donated are typically purchasing items that aren't typically donated. So like key proteins or meats, tofu, or whatever, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. Yes, true. Yeah, I agree.
Anything else? A couple of thoughts. I mean, again, I really enjoyed reading the report and hearing the presentation. And, you know, a few of the numbers really jumped out at me. You know, you look at the waste stream, and that 38% of the waste stream is compostable. That's a huge number to me. That's really, that really jumps out. And that 10% of it is potentially avoidable food waste. Those numbers really caught my attention. You know, looking at your HRIs as a potential recovery, I think they were orange or yellow, like they're higher potential, but difficult and challenging. I feel like that's an issue that can be worked on closer with restaurant and food associations. There's a real struggle with hotels and restaurants that, like you say, once food is guest facing, makes it really challenging, but there are ways to handle food so that they don't hit a buffet table and therefore aren't recoverable. There's other ways to handle food, but restaurants and hotels could use that kind of support in terms of learning how to do that.
Right.
Because for hotels, they'll prepare X amount of dishes for an event, and they always have, call it 10% more than they need at least to cover the event. If it's handled in a way, heated in a way, stored in a way, and not guest facing right away, then it can be recovered, where a hotel won't want to reuse that for their next event. They're not going to recycle it, but it is recoverable. So I think that there's a link missing there between food and restaurant and hotel associations. I think there's an education piece there that, in terms of the handling, that could really make a big difference, because other than that, I've been working in restaurants my whole life, and I see the waste, and I always have, and it's always made it, especially on big events and buffets and weddings and things like that. The amount that gets scraped in the garbage is phenomenal. But there are ways to handle it differently, and I think that's a really an association thing. So it's not local government, but I just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
The kitchen space processing, we talked about a little bit. That's been something that I've been really interested in for a while, in terms of managing the food that's produced in Pemberton better for our locals, for our farmers, and for food security. I think there's huge potential. We have it all here in Pemberton except that processing and storage. We have everything else. So I feel like it's an important part of our future. In terms of just kitchen space, I hope it's something that we earmark for when we start to vision and build our new community center or rec center out at the rec site. I think a big community kitchen should be part of that vision, or looked at anyway. Accessibility is a big one, and I assume we'll talk about it more at the regional district table for some of the more remote folks in our area. It's a little less applicable to this table in the village of Pemberton, but there are some access issues to the food bank, and there is the stigma and stuff that you mentioned earlier on. I really like the center point model that was done in Squamish. It's grocery store. It's very dignified. I just love the way they've set that up. So I think there is some potential here for us in Pemberton. Unfortunately for Sea Sky Community Services, they have to move, but maybe it is good timing to change the way they do the food bank here, and hopefully some opportunities in our building or however it works. But yeah, I think it is a good opportunity to change the model more like that center point model. Strategy 5, Action 22, with regards to the funding over methane gas, what is that? I don't think that's in our recommendations. Is that something just so that like organizations like your own can access more funding to do this sort of work? If it fits that criteria, is that what we're advocating towards? I guess my question is, we're going to look at some recommendations here in a sec on some of the action items. I'm happy to pursue that one as well, but I think we need a little more guidance on that. Where does that come from? Is that penned by the regional district and the municipalities sign on? How does that look to you, that advocacy for the methane gas reduction funding?
I mean, as far as where it came from, it's to increase sort of the emphasis, or the on food recovery as being part of a climate strategy. So just really making it clear that this food recovery piece is so critical to climate that it really, if it's pushed, it becomes a focus through the Clean BC program, that it has obviously multiple benefits into poverty reduction and that socioeconomic piece as well, the social piece. So that's sort of where it comes from, and why it's important is because if you can accomplish multiple goals, obviously at the same time. As far as the mechanism, maybe Lisa, I can turn it over to you as far as what's the mechanism for say Village of Pemberton getting behind an advocacy piece there. I don't know exactly how that would work.
Well, I was actually thinking maybe if there is funding left over and the Worcester or WCS Engagement and Planning is continuing to work on this initiative, that perhaps they could facilitate a letter.
Convene, right, yeah.
Yeah, convene, basically put that together and then get everyone else on board.
Right.
That would be my thought.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea because I would lean towards supporting that. I don't feel that our staff has enough of an understanding of that to put that kind of letter together. So if maybe something came from you folks and we could hand out to look. Okay.
That's easy.
And I guess my last comment is that strategy 5, action 25 and 27 is also pretty timely. I really enjoyed this report. I want to see it used, and I want to see it used and influence the work we do. So I think the fact that we're going into our OCP review and building community climate action plan, it's a good opportunity for us. And I really, really want to see us incorporate some of these actions and thoughts into those high-level documents, so that this work doesn't get lost, and it gets incorporated into our daily work.
Wonderful.
So again, thank you for that, Shannon and Lisa. Unless there's any other comments, would somebody like to
Move the recommendations.
or make their own motion?
Councilor Noble, I think. Too.
Sorry?
I'll
Councilor
move
Noble?
the 3
Yeah, go ahead.
recommendations.
Okay, so Councilor Noble's moving the recommendations as presented. We'll do all 3 of those in one. Is that okay, Sheena? Second by Councilor Zant. Further discussion? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then again, with regards to that advocacy piece, we'll hear more from you folks. We can contemplate that at another time.
Sure. Yeah.
Would you want to look at a motion to follow up on that education piece that Ms. Gordon suggested?
I would certainly like to have something out there so that the homeowner has an idea. I don't know what kind of.
So I did have a quick look at the SLRD website, and they also are following the Love Food, Hate Waste. I don't know what to call it, strategy or
Campaign.
Thank you. So, and they do have staff at the SLRD that is in charge of education and communication for their zero waste goals. So I would say it's probably underway, but maybe it could be better shared.
So how about we, a motion to direct staff to have a look at the Love Food program campaign?
So that is because the SLRD runs that for the village as well, right?
For the village as well?
Because that's solid waste management. So
I
they
see.
deal with all of that. So probably this is being presented at the SLRD.
I see.
And maybe what we're lacking is having some of that information, even if we have some kind of information linking back to their website. Maybe that's the part the village is missing.
Sure.
So maybe you could see if there's anything that the SLRD is going to be doing when this presentation is done and specifically bring that up. And then our staff can connect and see where we can help share.
Sure. Let's leave it at that for now then.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, they've got some great collateral on their website that I think would be very easy for us to just create a link to our website or our social media channels. So.
Okay, any last comments? Okay, thank you again, Mr. G. Thank you very much, Ms. Gordon. Thank you for your work, and we'll be in touch.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, where does that take us? We're on to number 10, 10A bylaws for first, second, and third. Ms. Kennedy will be presenting 10A 1, 2, and 3. Ms. Kennedy.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. The first bylaw I will be presenting is the Council Procedure Bylaw number 788, 2015, Amendment Bylaw number 909, 2021 for first, second, and third readings. At regular council meeting number 1546 held on Tuesday, October 5th, Council directed staff to prepare the amendment to the Council Procedure Bylaw to remove restrictions on electronic attendance at in-person council meetings and council committee meetings and to permit fully electronic meetings at the mayor's request or if necessitated by an emergency. The legislative requirement for public notice of the amendment to a procedure bylaw was met by advertising the proposed changes in the October 7th and October 14th editions of the Peak News magazine and by posting the information on the village website. The draft bylaw is attached to the report as Appendix A, and a track changes version is available on our website. As per council resolution, if the proposed bylaw receives first, second, and third readings today, it will be brought forward for adoption at a special council meeting to be held at 9 a.m. on Thursday, October 21st. And also, as requested by council resolution, staff will bring back the bylaw 6 months after adoption for further council review. And the recommendation of this report is that the Village of Pemberton Council Procedure Bylaw number 788, 2015, Amendment Bylaw number 909, 2021, receive first, second, and third readings. This concludes my report. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Any questions? Any thoughts? Motions. Go ahead, Councilor Craddock.
I'll move the recommendation.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And we're on to the variance bylaw 893.
Okay, well, thank you for hearing my second report this morning. And this report, the purpose of this report is to present to council amendments to the Board of Variance bylaw number 893, 2021, and to the Advisory Planning Commission bylaw number 626, 2009, for first, second, and third readings. Again, at a regular council meeting 1546 on Tuesday, October 5th, council directed staff to prepare these amendments to extend permission for electronic attendance and for fully electronic meetings of the commissions of the Advisory Planning Commission and the Board of Variance. The proposed amendment bylaws mimic the amendments made to the council procedure bylaw, allowing unrestricted electronic attendance at in-person commission meetings and allowing fully electronic attendance or fully electronic meetings, subject to the approval of the chair or if necessitated by an emergency. The draft bylaws have received the approval of Scott McRae, the Manager of Development Services. There's no legislative requirement for public notice of an amendment to a Board of Variance or Advisory Planning Commission bylaw. However, Advisory Planning Commission bylaw number 626, 2009 erroneously included a requirement for public notice. This provision will be removed through the proposed amendment, and in the interest of full transparency, the proposed changes were advertised in the October 14th edition of the Peak News magazine and posted on our website. The draft bylaws are attached to the report as appendices A and B, and consolidated versions showing track changes are available on the village website. The recommendations of this report are that Village of Pemberton Board of Variance bylaw number 983, 2021, Amendment bylaw number 910, 2021, and Advisory Planning Commission bylaw number 626, 2009, Amendment bylaw number 911, 2021, receive first, second, and third readings. And again, this concludes my report. I'll be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions? Moved by Councilor Zant, seconder. Councilor Antonelli, any further discussion? Opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Kennedy. Staff to join us for 10:04. Is Chris presenting on this, or is he just bringing it on?
Building official Derwin will be presenting.
There it is. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us. When you're all set and ready, we'll turn it over to you to talk about the Village of Pemberton building bylaw number 912.
Yes, the purpose of this report is to present council with the building bylaw number 912, 2021 for first, second, and third readings. The background, the committee of the whole meeting number 218 held on Tuesday, September 21st, the village's chief building official presented a report summarizing the changes encompassed in the draft building bylaw, noting that mostly are purely administrative. At that meeting, the committee expressed concern regarding the following elements of the proposed bylaw. Permit requirements for seasonal above-ground pools, the regulation of tents, the permit expiry dates, and construction-based fees. These concerns are just below. So I guess we can get into that. So permit requirements for seasonal above ground pools. Wording has been added to section 21.3 to clarify that the requirements for signed and sealed drawings and letters of assurance is at the discretion of the building official. Above ground frame pools from big box stores have structural engineering baked into their design, and further engineering would not be required. Drawings detailing setbacks with property lines and safety requirements with respect to fencing set out in section 7.30 of the Village of Pemberton zoning bylaw number 832, 2018, and part 21 of the building bylaw number 912, 2021 are mandatory for all applicants. Additionally, geotechnical engineering may be required on hillside lots to ensure slope stability and the safety of adjacent properties. The impact of residential pools on residents' annual utility costs. Utility costs are set by the Village of Pemberton Water Regulation Connection and Rates Bylaw number 232, 1989, Amendment Bylaw number 884, 2020, and Schedule A of the bylaw stipulates an annual flat rate of $108.47 for domestic swimming pools. Any change to this rate would need to be addressed through amendment of the Water Regulation Connection and Rates Bylaw number 232, 1989. This has been added to the Finance Department work plan to bring forward in the spring with other annual bylaw amendments. Regulation of tents. The proposed bylaw will regulate the erection of tents over 10 square meters, tents under the 10 square meter threshold that have been set up on residential properties must conform to the statutory right-of-way, easements, and lot line setback requirements established by section 7.1 of the Village of Pemberton zoning bylaw 832, 2018, and enforced by village bylaw officers, but will not be subject to building permit requirements. Permit expiry dates. Language regarding the expiry of stale permits and applications is added to encourage owners to complete their projects in a timely manner once started. Approved building permits are valid for 2 years. A provision has been made for projects that experience unavoidable delays. An owner may request an extension prior to the permit expiry date with a payment of $100 fee. However, if a permit is allowed to lapse, a new permit will be required before work may be resumed. Construction-based fees. Building permit fees are based on construction value per square foot, such that larger buildings, which generally require more staff time at permit application review, inspection, and occupancy phases, are assigned a higher value. The building official currently applies a rate of $260 per square foot for floor areas within the structure for a typical single-family dwelling, $75 per square foot of garage floor area, and $65 per square foot of deck and carport floor area, based on the Altus Group 2021 cost guide. Owners may contest the building official's valuation of their project by providing documentation of actual costs at occupancy. The valuation of commercial and industrial buildings is considered on a case-by-case basis. Energy step code. The committee supported the chief's building official's recommendation to proceed with industry consultation regarding the possibility of adding reference to the energy step code for part 3 buildings in the future. This has been added to the work plan for development services. Prohibition, obstruction of entry. At the recommendation of Village Legal Counsel, section 6.8 has been revised and now reads as follows, with the new wording shown in red. 6.8. Person must not interfere or obstruct with the entry of a building official or other authorized personnel of the village onto property in the administration of this bylaw. And for certainty, a person must not interfere or obstruct the building official or other authorized persons of the village from entering into a building whether to ascertain the requirements of this building are not being met. Okay, communications. Once adopted, the new bylaw will be posted on the village website. Significant changes will be communicated to builders through bulletins posted on the website and distributed to permit holders and applicants as applicable. The draft bylaw has received legal review and meets BC Building Code and relevant provincial legislation. There are no impacts to the budget or staff hours for consideration. Administration of the new building bylaw as presented can be accommodated as part of the day-to-day operations within the building division of development services. Review of this initiative has no impact on other jurisdictions. There are no alternative options for consideration. And we recommend that the Village of Pemberton Building Bylaw number 9/12/2021 receive first, second, and third readings. And recommendation 2, that the Village of Pemberton Building Bylaw number 9/12/2021 be considered for fourth and final reading at the special council meeting scheduled for Thursday, October 21st, 2021 at 9 a.m. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Councilor Crack.
Yeah, thanks for the report, Chris. Just one question under regulation of tents, and maybe I missed it somewhere in the full report. Are we going to restrict the amount of tents that can be on the single residential property?
No, but they do have to conform to site setbacks, lot coverage and everything like that. So if they are not conforming with the zoning bylaw, then yes, we would restrict them.
But otherwise, if a person goes by everything that's required, there's no limitation to how many tents on the property.
It's not, no.
I think it's certainly something I would like to see us look at. I know there are properties in the community with multiple tents on their property, and it's not very attractive in a residential area, especially when they get full of all kinds of odds and sods and things like that. So, sorry.
I think that would be addressed in the zoning bylaw, so we could make,
Okay.
as opposed to the building bylaw.
Okay.
We are doing some work on some additional updates to the zoning bylaw, so we could potentially pass, we could make a resolution to review that during the zoning bylaw review.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Chris.
Any other questions? Councilor Sand?
My only question is in regards to 6.8 under prohibition of restrictive entry. Now, I understand it says here that, this was added as advised by legal counsel. My concern is
Sorry, Councilor Sand, which item are you on?
page 65 at the very bottom in the red.
Yeah.
Prohibition of restrictive entry.
Okay.
So like I said, I understand that this was from legal counsel, and that's great. My concern is, even though it's legal counsel, can we actually force our way into somebody's home to look at a bylaw? Like, search warrants or anything when it comes to the RCMP, but for the village as a authoritative figure as such as this, I wonder if, even though we have legal counsel, if we'd end up.
It's in the local government act, the community charter. You can't just say, hi, I'm here to commit. Typically you provide 24 hours, or we work with the individual.
Understood.
However, I would say, and I'll let Mr. Derwin explain or go on if I haven't said enough, but if there's a serious safety issue, I think that would supersede any sort of notice, and that we would require to go in immediately if that was drawn to our attention. Would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely.
We don't typically just want to just go onto people's personal
Right.
property, and but if there is a situation where we need to, we are actually given authority under a higher level than this particular bylaw to do so.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Any other questions?
Recommendation.
Okay. We're moving both of those in one as well, Ms. Fraser, including the special meeting. Okay, moved by Councillor Zant, second by Councillor Craddock. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Chris. Okay, we're on to 10.5, which is Village Permanent Fees and Charges Bylaw 905. Ms. Kennedy.
Yes, that one is for me again. Good morning again, Mayor and Council. This report is a follow-up to the building bylaw report that you just heard from building official Chris Derwin. At the committee of the whole meeting number 218 held on Tuesday, September 21st, 2021, Council reviewed the draft building bylaw that included the draft building fee schedule, which will form part of the fees and charges bylaw. And earlier today, Council gave first, second, and third readings to building bylaw number 9/12/2021. So to avoid a situation where there is no fee schedule in effect, staff are presenting an amendment to the fees and charges bylaw number 905 to add the new building fee schedule to the bylaw concurrently with the readings of the new building bylaw. There have been no changes to the draft fee schedule since it was reviewed by the committee on September 21st. The proposed amendment to the fees and charges bylaw adds building-related fees as Schedule T and updates the table of contents to reflect the change. The amendment bylaw is attached to the report as Appendix A. The recommendation of this report is that Village of Pemberton fees and charges bylaw number 905/2021, amendment building fees bylaw number 913/2021 receive first, second, and third readings. This concludes my report, and I will be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Kennedy, any questions? Somebody like to move the recommendation? Councilor Craddock.
I'll move recommendation 1 and 2 if it's acceptable.
Seconded by Councilor Noble. Any other discussion? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy.
Did we move both recommendations? I'm sorry, I forgot to
Yeah.
mention the second one. You did move both. Okay, thank you.
Okay, number 11, mayor's report. Pretty quick one again. Hope everybody enjoyed their Thanksgiving weekend. Feel like we've seen it all lately. Monsoon rains, the golden fall days. It's been pretty great.
Yeah.
Last night the moon was incredible.
Wasn't it?
It was pretty great. Not a ton to report. A few of my regular meetings. Ongoing, I met with the SLRD CAO search committee again. That's an ongoing process. We're into the long listing and it's still out there. The job opening is still posted. Met with VCH, the regular twice monthly VCH call. Not a lot new there. I assume you guys are pretty up to date on your numbers. Our vaccination rates in BC, Vancouver Coastal Health Authority, are really good. I think they're like the best in the province, which is kind of nice. And similarly, the infection rates have been pretty low in the BC as well and plateauing. So hopefully some good news. The conversation continues to be, or one of the predominant conversations continues to be on that call as rates climb and there's less need, but we still want to offer vaccination clinics to the unvaccinated. How is that being provided? It was easier when lots of people needed to access it. So just a reminder, on October 21st, this upcoming Thursday, anybody who doesn't know, there is another vaccination clinic in Pemberton, and they will be hosting them sort of throughout the corridor to accommodate those folks that still want to get their first or second shot. But there's still a lot of conversation about how it can be made available at pharmacies or through our local doctors without having waste, without vaccine wasting on the shelves, so to speak. And that conversation is ramping up again because of the direction they're going with kids of 5 to 11 getting vaccinated. So how is that going to be accessible? How are we going to make that work? So that's a big part of that conversation.
Can I add one?
Just,
Go ahead.
just before we leave that, if I might, Mayor, with that report, it's coming up Thursday. I've talked to the pharmacy. They will not be giving flu shots or any shots there because they don't have the staff. So a lot of questions I'm getting from seniors is about the booster shot and flu shots. And at this point in time, I'm not getting any answers on either one. Is there anything that you can fill in on?
My understanding was the flu shot was going ahead as usual through the pharmacy. I haven't heard of a staff shortage there.
I was at the pharmacy yesterday asking because I tried to get in Squamish when I was there yesterday, and the pharmacy said they will not be doing them again this year because they don't have the staff. So I would like to know for the community.
There was something, if I could say, posted on Facebook. There's a link. I think you go through a link and you register, and then they're going to have a number of clinics in Pemberton where you can go, and I believe it was at the community center. It was a post by somebody in the public. It wasn't posted by VCH with a link. And it was it was last week, I believe. So we can look into it and try to track down that information. It happened so quickly, and then I didn't think to clip it.
I appreciate it.
There are some clinics for the flu shots going to be taking place in Pemberton.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that too.
Center.
If you don't mind,
Yeah.
because what I was told at the pharmacy was going to Whistler.
Yeah,
And if you go to Whistler or Squamish, you have to go online someplace and then you
you have to make a booking, it's the same thing.
And I don't think that's reasonable to expect our community to have to go to Whistler. So I'd really like a follow-up, and if we can run in our e-news and let us know somehow, because I would like to get my booster and I'd like to get the flu shot, but I haven't found anything out where I can do it.
The booster at this point is still only for immunocompromised, not for senior.
Nobody over 100 like you
No,
can get it.
no.
Okay,
So it's not senior based, it's,
okay.
it's,
Fair enough.
and that's at this point,
Mhm.
right? And as you know, things change
Yeah.
frequently. I can get a little more information on that. That was, you know, what I was told, or what I heard on the call regarding the third booster was, if you're not sure, go to the VCH website and they can take you through it. So if people are asking you that direct question, well, do I apply for a booster? I would go right to the VCH website on that one.
Okay.
And I understand for the booster, if you're immune compromised, you are getting notified that
Yes,
it's
that's
time for
it.
you to come in.
Yeah.
That's good. I appreciate that. I can pass that along then. And the flu shot would be my next question then, how we can.
Yeah, flu shot, because I mean, it was talked about, and because there is lots of conversation out in the general community about, well, you know, how does the COVID vaccine interact with the flu shot? Should I be, shouldn't I be? And the conversation on DC was, it's business as usual for the flu shot. In fact, they want to remind folks to go get it this year because they feel there's a fear that A, it'll be a big flu season, and B, well, I got my COVID shot, I'm not going for my flu shot. You know what I mean? Like there might be a little bit of that attitude. So the conversation was, it's business as usual. It should be at the pharmacy. So this is particular to us. So I follow that.
If you don't mind, because yesterday in Squamish and Whistler was their kickoff campaign
Yeah.
and they were full completely and nothing in our community. So I appreciate the follow-up.
Did you have something, Anne?
I did. I also wanted to let everyone know that November, December, COVID vaccine clinics will be at Permanent Secondary School. They won't be at the community center. So that's a change. They just said they're able to accommodate individuals inside as opposed to having people outside, which we have to do it. And given the weather's changing, they just thought VCH thought it would be a better location. So that's going to be coming forward in November, December. But I do know at the community center, there are some flu shot dates.
Flu shot date?
Yes,
Okay.
so we can get that information, and pass it along and share it as well.
Thank you.
And I believe you do need to make a booking, so they have a link, so we'll get that information, put it out.
Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's good. That's good. I wasn't aware of that. I think the only other meeting to report on was ministers, mayors and chairs, ministers meeting with President of UBCM and Minister Osborne. A lot of different conversation about what's going on in our communities. What I chose to discuss in my time slot was, two things. Number one was, it was kind of a wide open forum this time. Usually our ministers meetings, teleconference minister meetings are a little bit more directed. They asked us some fairly open net questions. So I just discussed about our transit goals and how frustrating it is. And I'm basically trying to pick any opportunity I can with any minister and any audience to say, we need your support. Every time you're in cabinet, every time this discussion comes up cross ministry, we need support to get transit moving in our corridor because it's not moving at the rate we want. So I chose that venue to bring that message again. As well, myself, I think it was Mayor Squamish, we both also spoke to the confusion around what local government can do in terms of mandating staff to get vaccinated. And we asked for further clarity on that. I described a little bit in general terms some of the issues we've had, community center, a couple, I think it was Mayor Squamish and somebody else. Were you on that call? No, somebody else brought it up as well. But just the fact that, we're hearing different things. If provincial government can do this, now we're hearing City of Vancouver can do that. What can we do as local government? What are our legal options and avenues, because they seem to be changing. So there was no answer provided on that call, but the question was raised and we asked for further clarity on that. I think that's it. I mean, coming up, I've got a meeting tomorrow so I chased down Francois Bouchard, who's my contact from CN for a number of years, who's higher up the food chain now and out of Montreal, I think, or Toronto. But I chased him down and he gave me his successor's contact. A little bit frustrating, but I finally got him to commit to a phone meeting, I think it's tomorrow, just to once again talk about the work we're trying to do on the Lillooet Crossing, the CN Bridge. So we'll see how that progresses. CAO and I have an RCMP quarterly meeting set up at the end of the week, and next week is our regional district board meetings again. And I think that's all I got. I feel like I'm missing something. That's all I got. Any council reports? Okay.
Just a quick update from the banking district. If anybody had an opportunity to go over and take a look at the new culverts they put in on the Iron Canal. Super impressed the way it worked. There was water on the south side of the dike, but there was no water into the townhouse development on the left-hand side. So it is working. I watched it a couple of times. And
Did you go after this big rain here?
Yes, yeah, that's when I went.
It's great.
And other people were going by and everybody was commenting, hey, this is working. So money well spent, and kudos to the Dyking District. It's nice to see that we're moving forward with some of these major projects and it's making a difference. So it was good. It was fun to watch. Actually. Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a bigger project than I thought when I saw them, when I went in there and they started the work, and then after it's.
Yeah, and if you take a look at it, those that haven't seen it, there's two huge culverts lower down that the water runs through continually. And then there's two huge culverts up higher that have got flat gates coming from the south. So when the Lillooet River backs up, it can't push back into that area. So it's quite interesting if you're out for a run or a walk or a hike. It's really an interesting site. And they're in the process right now of putting in the pulleys and that type of thing to open and close them from the top. So yeah, it's going well. I was excited and greened it all up when they're done, sprayed it with the grass. So it's really made a nice corner there.
Great.
Thank you. Any other kind? Go ahead, Councilor.
Just a quick library board report. The library reported that they received a donation from SLRD, and they want to say thank you for the purchase of children's books. And a thank you to the Friends of the Library for the recent book sale. They did quite well. I believe it was, sorry, they don't have the amount here, but they said they did really well. They appreciate the volunteers' time, and at the next AGM, there will be a position open for treasurer, as current treasurer is, her term is expiring, and there will be another term expiring for Tracy Graham. And they want to say thank you to them for supporting and being on the board. So there'll be two positions open if anybody's interested. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Noble?
Not much, but I did attend the community mapping workshop on the 13th. So there's been a lot of work done on that, which is still ongoing for the emergency response mapping.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Yep. Okay. Number 13, correspondence for action. We have one from Mr. Linklater, President of the Rotary Club. Requesting that the village proclaim October 24th as World Polio Day.
We have done this in the past.
Anybody like to make that motion? Councilor Craddock?
Second.
Councilor Zant, any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Be a great opportunity to make a comment about how great vaccines are, I guess. Correspondence for information. Somebody like to discuss this or move receipt?
Move sheet.
Seconder, Councilor Zant, any opposed? Motion carries. Decision on late business. Late business, there's none. Notice of motion. Oh, Councilor Noble, sorry.
There's just one thing for late business. I don't know if we can slide it in or not, but I had some concerns from members of the community just as of yesterday regarding the location for the fireworks and about it being in very close proximity to a lot of livestock.
I do have new information on that. We just had a conversation late last night that we will most likely be able to, we are going to be able to do the fireworks at Signal Hill for one more year. So we're going to put it back there, but next year it will be moving and we'll start letting people know well in advance and start planning for it. The reason it was moved, so phase 4 which is the last phase, which is closest to the back of Signal Hill, it will be too close for us to be able to set off the fireworks. So it looks like we will have one more year.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good news. Thank you.
And so we're gonna put new messaging out this week so that the public is aware.
And can we, I'm sure you will, but make sure that the public understands why the original decision, why we're going back. I mean, you know, people were confused and some upset because it wasn't, I got you, Councilman, wasn't as accessible, understandably. But it wasn't a decision we just randomly made. It was made because of the
Like to keep
development.
it there.
Yeah, so we're moving it back, not because of a public outcry on Facebook is what I'm getting at.
I hear you.
I don't want to be putting it out there that we're changing it because of Facebook.
Yeah.
Noise.
And we also want to
Changing it
know,
because
this
we have-
is going to move,
Exactly. So
or we don't have fireworks. We've looked at a couple of other spots, but I mean, maybe we look at what the rec site looks like, but you're still having a lot of people drive out there, the echoing and percussion that happens there. We know what happens with the blasting. You know, there are other farm animals in that location. So there's never going to be another perfect location like Signal Hill. I mean, whether you call that perfect or not, people are on the fence about fireworks regardless, but it's not because we just want to move them. Yeah.
Councilor Noble?
That was my next question, was whether we considered the suitability of the Rex location. There's less livestock there as long as we make sure the roaming horses are rounded up ahead of time.
Maybe it'll
And
scare
it would,
them off.
and it would be an amazing display for all the people up on the hillside.
I'm not sure people in that area would be particularly happy given the amount of construction they're already with. I think it might add a little bit too much right now. I think there's a lot of sensitivities in that area. Anyway, we'll be looking at other options and getting it out early. This whole conversation just happened 2 weeks ago, and then all of a sudden we went, holy, we need to start letting the public know there's at least a change in venue. So.
Okay, thanks for bringing that up, Councilor Noble. If there's nothing else, we're into question period. The regular council meeting is now open for questions from the public. Please be reminded that only questions directly related to items discussed during this meeting are permitted. If any members of the public attending via Zoom webinar wish to ask a question, please click the raised hand feature in the webinar controls. This will notify our staff that you'd like to ask a question, and you'll unmute your microphone when it's your turn to speak. Anything?
There are no questions, Mayor Richmond.
Thank you. Okay, and then with that, I will look for a motion from camera, please. Councilor Zan, seconded by Councilor Craddock. Any opposed? Motion carries. We're on camera. Do we need a 5-minute break? All right. I will call to order. Maybe the whole number 219 for October 19th. And in honor of the Liwa Tour, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Liwa Nation. Are there any amendments to the agenda? None. Motion to approve as presented. Councilor Zan, seconded by Councilor Craddock. Any opposed? Motion carries. Adoption of minutes from committee of the whole number 218 from September 21st, moved by Councilor Zan, seconded by Councilor Antonelli. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll go right on to number 4. We have a delegation. This is from the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative. Bring some guests in.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Is there a third person? I have a third person. No, is it just the two of you?
Just the two of us.
Awesome. So welcome, Mr. Fisher. Thank you for joining us. And I look forward to your presentation to see if it's at all the same as the last time I heard it. So here to watch.
It'll be better.
And even better. Excellent. And we got Karen Elliott, who's wearing the hat of this board. And I'll let you do your own introductions. But not joining us as the Mayor of Squamish today, joining us on behalf of the BC Social Procurement Initiative. Kind of disappointed you didn't make the drive up, Karen, but I guess that's your loss. You could have come next time. With that, I'll turn it over to you guys. We have 15 minutes for your presentation, and that'll leave us some time for discussion after. So
Great.
Whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mayor Richmond. And sorry, I couldn't be there in person, but I am just taking a break from my own council meetings this afternoon to join you. So I am joining you as co-chair of the BC Social Procurement Initiative, and my fellow co-chair is Colleen Evans, who is a councillor in Campbell River. She couldn't be with us today. And then the person doing the presentation, which will be excellent, is Rob Fisher, who's the coordinator from Scale Collaborative, which is the consulting firm that provides so much support to the local governments that are engaged in BC SPI. So Squamish has been a member of the BC Social Procurement Initiative since the beginning of 2021. We were the first community outside of the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities to join. And earlier this year, the province granted to BC SPI $500,000 to expand the initiative across the province. And so Colleen and I, working with Rob and other folks, we're reaching out to communities across this province to see if we can engage more of us in working on social procurement. And so Rob will explain that in more detail, but what it is and how it's working for us and other communities, both large and small. So Victoria is our largest member, but we have lots of tiny communities. We have regional districts that are our members as well. But what we're seeing in Squamish is that even in the last year, we've been able to start to really use social procurement as part of our COVID recovery strategy and start to grant more business to local companies while still following all of the trade regulations and following a fair procurement process. But it's really allowed us to focus on local jobs and local contractors and help in the recovery. So obviously we're here today to encourage your membership. We're not trying to add to your workload. As you'll see from Rob's presentation, this is really about meeting each community where there's at. And there's so many resources already created for your staff to use and training available as well. So this is about whatever journey you want to go on. We just hope you go on it with us and join this movement. So I'll turn it over to Rob.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. I'm just going to share my screen. Just let me know if you can see this.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Richmond and members of council. As Mayor Elliott mentioned, I'm Rob Fisher, project coordinator for the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative. Very pleased to be joining you today from the Lekwungen Territories here in Victoria to present to you about the opportunity for the village of Pemberton to become a member of BCSPI. During this presentation, we'll open up with some information about the what, the why, and what's possible with social procurement, and then we'll look at how these new best practices can be implemented at local government level. And then we'll talk a bit about what BCSPI is and how becoming a member can support that implementation process. So what is social procurement? Well, simply put, social procurement practices can leverage additional social value from existing purchasing. And when we look at the evolution of procurement, we can see that it was only in the 60s that we started to include green considerations in our procurement practices. And now, just as recently as 2018, social considerations are starting to emerge in the procurement process, considering the social impacts of our purchasing. So when we add that additional social consideration into our existing purchasing, we are creating not only the usual purchaser and supplier value, but we're also creating additional benefits for our community. So why are more governments and purchasers starting to look at these processes? Well, every purchase has an economic, environmental, and social impact. And so when we focus on best value for money, procurement is much more than a financial transaction. And when we mobilize our existing spending to include that additional social value, procurement becomes a tool for building healthy communities. Key opportunity areas for social procurement are local employment opportunities, skills training and apprenticeship opportunities that can lead to meaningful work and help keep talent in our communities, social value or diversity in the supply chain, and broader community economic development opportunities that include support for small to medium-sized businesses and also social enterprises and non-profits who are directly serving the local community. Social procurement objectives can be connected directly to the needs of the community and government's social and strategic planning goals. For example, social procurement can contribute to many of the focus items described in the Village of Pemberton's official community plan. More specifically, things like enhancing relations with Aboriginal communities, creating healthy and safe communities, improving collaboration amongst jurisdictions, and greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets. And because social procurement can generate local economic activity, local employment opportunities, and broader social impact, it's now being adopted by more and more governments and organisations as a key tool in the economic recovery and resiliency toolbox. When we think about government spending, there are two main avenues for social procurement implementation. One is through the social purchasing of goods and services, and this is the purchasing of all the items that you currently buy for your operations and community services. These are things like office supplies, catering, printing, events collateral, janitorial services, and maintenance services. And the other is through major infrastructure or construction projects. And these larger projects yield many opportunities for social procurement from the design stage through the actual build and then the ongoing maintenance and servicing. Some of the key social procurement implementation options for local governments are listed here. Under threshold and direct award purchasing is discretionary buying, which is often dictated by policy at a certain monetary level. Where going out to tender is not required. This includes things purchased on corporate credit cards and other items that fall below those internal purchasing thresholds. When the cost and definition of the procurement require you to go out to tender, this is when you can include that additional social value criteria and language in the bidding process. Weighting and evaluating this alongside traditional purchasing criteria like cost, quality, and experience. We touched on the opportunities in larger projects, but unbundling portions of these types of contracts is another way that local suppliers can be considered in the process. And exploring contractors' supply chains is another key opportunity. There are ways to include social procurement in purchasing where it might not otherwise be obvious. For example, contracting a design firm for the planning stage of a project or a consultant to carry out more clerical-based work. Here you can explore potential bidders' existing supply chains by asking where they buy their catering, cleaning, and office supplies, for example. And finally, social procurement can be included in government purchasing policy, allowing community social value outcomes to be defined and considered in the procurement process. One big question that comes up around social procurement is it legal? What about the trade agreements? Well, yes, it is legal, but yes, of course, the trade agreements do still apply. And the key thing to know here is that you cannot restrict competition, but you can require social value outcomes from all bidders by including social value considerations into the purchasing process. Notably, trade agreements also have exceptions for nonprofits and other community organizations, and of course, financial thresholds that allow for a fair amount of flexibility and discretion in local and social purchasing. Another big question is, does social procurement cost more? Well, through BCSPI and other similar initiatives, there's no evidence that this is true. And generally, requesting community outcomes from bidders will not increase the overall price, but it will increase the overall value. And depending on how you consider the procurement opportunity, lowest price does not always need to be the defining factor when extra social value is being created from the procurement and best value is being considered. And of course, many governments will want to know how much additional load joining BCSPI and implementing social procurement will put on their existing resources. Well, the good news is that BCSPI membership actually adds capacity and takes away the heavy lifting. We meet member staff where they're at with resource capacity and create a social procurement implementation journey that is achievable and fully supported by all of the training, templates, coaching, and other resources available to members. So we've looked at some opportunities around social procurement, but let's talk a little bit about how BCSPI is helping governments and other anchor purchasers across the province to implement these new best practices. BCSPI is a collaborative initiative on a mission to improve the health of our communities and the strength of our local economies by changing the sector, the culture of public sector procurement. And we do this by providing local governments with access to a shared and collaborative learning network that provides training, coaching, and a wide array of other capacity building resources to support its members along their social procurement implementation journey. Importantly, BCSPI is an initiative that is created by local governments for local governments. The initiative is governed by a steering committee made up of political and senior staff leads from each member community. This steering committee meets quarterly to review the progress of the initiative and decide on direction and next steps for the project, as well as what resources and services will be most beneficial to its members. Mayor Karen Elliott from the District of Squamish and Councillor Colleen Evans from the City of Campbell River co-chair the steering committee. Looking back at the history of BCSPI, it started as a concept in 2016 when a group of local governments on Vancouver Island wanted to explore the creation of a shared social procurement learning hub in the region. And in 2018, the working group received funding from the Island Coastal Economic Trust and the City of Victoria, and the initiative was launched in 2019 with 9 initial members. And from 2019 through to 2021, CCSPI, as it was known then, grew in size with over 20 additional members joining. And in June of this year, the BC government recognised social procurement and CCSPI as a key economic recovery opportunity and provided funding for province-wide expansion and launched BCSPI. BCSPI now has 30 participating member organisations, and these communities range in size from larger cities to regional districts to small rural municipalities. Each member community has their own unique social challenges, and as I mentioned, the benefit of social procurement is these policies and practices can be directly linked to strategic goals and social planning objectives, meaning that the additional social value these members are creating from their existing purchasing is going directly to the social issues they have identified as most important to address. In those first 2 years, BCSPI has worked with over 200 individual staff from member communities and trained over 150 member staff in social procurement practices and concepts. Members have realised over $200 million in spending with added social value and have implemented social procurement practices in over 50 pilot projects across the region, from small credit card spends to goods and services buying to larger construction projects. And our capacity building services are delivered by a team of social procurement, industry and engagement and community impact experts, with Bisocial Canada and Presentations Plus developing resources and delivering coaching and training, Scale Collaborative providing project management support and coordination, and the Vancouver Island Construction Association leading engagement and liaison with the construction sector. What we see here is the BCSPI member journey, which guides the community's progress from understanding the basic concepts of social procurement to full implementation impact measurement. As we follow the steps of 1 through 12, we can see how members start with the onboarding process and then work with the BCSPI team to plan an achievable social procurement journey. Yes.
Can you just pause for a second here? We got a bunch of noise behind us and we're starting to lose you. Just give us a second here.
No worries.
We know they're working.
Tuesdays are busy, municipal working days. We should change that schedule.
Yeah, that's a little better. Maybe just back up 1 minute if you don't mind.
How far would you like me to go back? Just tell me when to start. Just here?
Yeah.
Okay, so BCSPI service delivery partners, and we can see here Bisocial Canada, Presentations Plus, Scale Collaborative and the Vancouver Island Construction Association are all delivering, developing and providing these resources to our members. And we moved into looking at the BCSPI member journey, and we can see steps here 1 through 12, which is how we plan out the progress of a community once they join the initiative. So going from the basic concepts of understanding right through to impact measurement and implementation. And as you can see, as we follow through steps 1 to 12, you can see how we'll start with some onboarding and then work with the BCSPI team to plan an achievable social procurement journey and identify those social procurement outcomes that match members' social procurement and strategic planning goals. And the next stage then is to train staff from basic social procurement concepts to advanced implementation workshops. And then you can see we can enter the first circle where pilot projects are identified. And this is where the BCSPI team works directly with members to provide direct coaching support using the easy to adapt templates and other resources as we move through the process. Once a sufficient amount of pilot projects have been undertaken and member staff are comfortable with adding social procurement criteria to purchasing, we then look at including social procurement in purchasing policy. And once again, the BCSPI team provides direct support here with templates and an accompanying policy guide, broader organisational training to introduce procurement to wider staff audience, and more capacity building resources. And then the member is in the full implementation phase, moving around the final circle in the visual we can see here. And this is where social procurement is going into purchasing, social value vendors in the community, building their capacity to respond and deliver on government purchasing opportunities, and the social value outcomes that were decided upon at step 2 are being measured and reported on. And we see members remaining in the initiative for 2 to 3 years maximum as they work through this process. And importantly, BCSPI recognises governments have limited resources, as we've mentioned, and some members are able to move more quickly through the process where others need to take time and an approach that works best for them. But the long-term goal is always for a member to take the learning forward into implementation to a point where they no longer require the support of BCSPI and continue to mobilise their spend to create additional community benefits for a foreseeable future. I mentioned BCSPI members get access to a whole host of resources to support their social procurement journey. And these include best practice examples, templates, guides, full online resource library of example RFPs and social procurement work from all the other members, dedicated coaching support and a thriving community of practice where lessons learned, challenges and outcomes are shared, and supplier outreach, impact measurement and communications tools. Coaching consulting support is available from the BCSPI team of experts and includes one-to-one coaching for member staff to help build capacity, initial project reviews, support on social criteria language and weighting, policy development assistance, and more. And BCSPI works on both the buyer and supplier side to help members identify and connect with the social value suppliers in their communities, helping them to recognise the opportunity to do business with government, but also to understand how to respond to and deliver on government contracts and building all important relationships between the demand and supply side. We take a regional approach to impact measurement and have partnered with Royal Roads University to develop a region-wide impact measurement framework and accompanying guide to support members in measuring the impact of their social procurement. And this regional impact measurement framework is aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Finally, joining BCSPI is easy, affordable, and impactful for your community. Our fee structure is population-based, meaning that all the resources, training, and capacity building support we've discussed is available for an annual membership fee, which is the equivalent that you would pay to your local area of government association. In the case of the Village of Pemberton, this would be the same as your annual LGA dues, which I believe are currently around $500. Our unique collaborative regional model ensures that communities are able to work together and share learning, successes, challenges, and opportunities in order to advance social procurement effectively and support social and strategic planning goals for your community. And that's the end of the presentation. So thank you so much. Can I open up for some questions?
Thank you so much. Any questions?
I have a couple questions if.
Go ahead, Councilor Zen.
So I guess my question is more directed towards staff and Mr. Fisher is in regards to it. Within your document, you didn't mention what the cost would be, except that it depends on the size of your municipality. So that's my one question. We are coming to budgetary talks in the next couple months. So I'm wondering if this is something we sign on for, what's that cost going to look like?
So the cost is the same as your LGA dues. So it's $500 a year, around $500. I believe it's about $520. I'm not sure what the exact cost would be, but it would be the same equivalent. And that's as many staff as you want on board. That's the entire cost per year.
And then my next question is in regards to if staff has had the opportunity to review some of these training opportunities that you speak of, or does staff feel that if you have reviewed them, is there a lot that staff, if there is a lot of staff training opportunities that they will find useful?
We haven't looked at anything yet. No.
Those are all my questions.
Cool, thank you. Any questions? I got a couple. We talked about it last time, Mr. Fisher, and you brought it up on because I'm sure you hear it every single time, but the concern of staff capacity and all that sort of thing for a small organization like ourselves. I'm quite interested in this work. I also recognize the overburdened desks of our staff. So you mentioned that, municipality can move through the journey, as you put it, at the pace that they're able to. I was looking at your wheel graph and trying to see the points within there that would really be sort of staff heavy. I assume that would be right before you go into step 5 you had there, step 4 or step 5. Just to give me a sense, again, what does it look like for our staff as we move through those 12 steps? What are we going to need to provide from a staff level?
Yeah, that's a great question. From a staff level, obviously, we'd hope that you'd be able to provide a staff lead on that to do the initial check-in and kind of actually figure out what resources are available, how much time can you spend on it, what can you do? And then we want to craft a journey around that. And so one of the initial, commitments would be the training sessions to move through the core training, which is the concepts through to implementation. The first 2 training sessions, 101 and 201, those are the key ones. And then 301 can be done later on as it involves construction. So that might be at a pilot project time. And then when it comes to that first wheel you mentioned, we really do walk with staff at that time. Like we would ask you to identify a project you want to try social procurement in, and then we bring in our templates, which are fully customizable. We bring in our coaching to really get that language in, talk to the staff about what's achievable here, how you would weight it, what kind of language you would use. And we really do that piece of the work for you. So that staff member gets comfortable with putting this kind of language in. And we'll do that as many times as necessary. And, every member gets 10 consulting hours per year as part of that membership price that we discussed. And normally that's plenty of time to get a good few initial pilot projects going. And we'll do that as necessary. And it's backed up by all of the resources and the community of practice. So staff time might be taken a little bit by coming to these kind of community of practices that happen bi-monthly, hearing shared learning. We do a lot of communication through our newsletter and we always share new resources, and most of the learning is available online. So it can be done, as time allows. There's lots of webinars folks can dig into and templates and things like that. But really, we do try and meet members where they're at with that capacity. And that's that second point on that member journey is we will map something that's achievable for you.
Great, thank you. Mary Elliott, has Squamish gone through the 12 steps? Have you put a project through, or where are you guys at?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are a municipality. We have a person working full-time in purchasing. And so I think that's not the same for all of our members. But at the end of the second quarter of this year, we had about 64% of our procurement documents were going out with some social value requirement. Many of them GHG statements, GHG reduction statements. Many of them now related to local employment and local contractors. So we used our BC Restart funds to build some covered structures in town. And because they were below the trade threshold, we actually said that we were only accepting bids from local contractors. And so we were able to deliver that work right into our community. We're doing a similar project with dike vegetation maintenance, and we're awarding 10 points for local employment. So I think we've been able, and we've updated our policy. I wouldn't say it's strong yet, but we put enough language in that would allow us to start to include these social values. And I think once we've been doing this for a little while, we'll go back and do a more fulsome review of our policy so that we can start tackling sort of those larger and larger infrastructure projects and development projects. But we've started, we're now implementing our credit card program. So our staff that get cards, we're going to train them on, you can buy from Amazon, but what does that bring to our community? Or you could buy from a local stationery store, that sort of thing. So we're trying to talk to them about value, but also community benefit when they're using those below threshold credit cards. So those are some of the things we've been able to do with one person on staff. So we started with an update of our policy and identifying those first few projects where we thought this could make a difference. And now the ball is rolling, and it's by the end of the year, we would expect about 90% of our procurement bids will have some sort of social value statement in them.
Is it too early? I mean, you talk about, we have within our RFP process and all that, some points for local vendors, that sort of thing, that's already in play. And that would be part of this, as you've mentioned. But you talk about GHG and other social values. Have you found, or is it too early yet, that any of your local suppliers have not been able to meet the new criteria? You know what I mean? Has it actually had a bit of an unintended consequence that way?
I think this is where the conversation around vendor engagement is really important. So if we want, let's say, nonprofits to bid on our catering, right? So maybe our adults with disability program, maybe we would like them to provide the cookies for our open houses and the coffee station, that sort of thing. We have to give them time to think about that and prepare for that. So I don't think we're creating a really high bar at this point. Several times it's just a statement that people need to include. And then on areas where we believe we can ensure we have multiple bidders, like we did with the covered structures, we knew there were enough local contractors around. We felt we could put stronger language in. So we're giving our vendor community time to recognize that this is a new direction for the District of Squamish, and they have to learn to be ready. And that's why we have some industry experts helping with the BC SPI initiative. But you also need to give your local folks time and the knowledge to respond. And Rob, maybe are there resources that BC SPI provides in that regard? So maybe you could speak to those around the vendor engagement.
Absolutely, and I mentioned that in the short presentation, but we do a lot of work on vendor engagement, and there's resources that can be shared with chambers and economic development folks, and ways that you can actually go out to collect information about vendors in your community and build a bit of a database, even to start with some of those smaller purchasing spends on P cards and such that can start to build those relationships. Of course, as Mary Elliott mentioned, it does take time. for local suppliers to kind of clue into this. We're using some really interesting approaches with questionnaires to really reduce the barriers for responding, where they can kind of tick yes, no answers and things like that. And that's been seeing some good results. But certainly with some of our, communities that are further along the process, they've been doing social procurement for, a good couple of years now, and they're seeing really good results from their suppliers who are starting to adapt and understand and really see the benefits that they're bringing in, connecting that back to their local community.
And so it's definitely not a one size fits all sort of thing. You can customize per whatever as to what the project is by the sounds of it.
Absolutely, and that's where we help. We meet with staff looking at the project and going, what's the best approach? I can give you a recent example of that. The City of Victoria's got a procurement project where we came and met with them. We looked at what they were trying to do and we recommended a particular approach for it. It was an RFQ process with the social value questionnaire. We're working with them to help them update that questionnaire to match their objectives. So all of our templates are fully customizable to pretty much match what you've identified as your key outcomes, which all come from your community planning. And so, there's lots of different ways we can support, but one of the main ways we do that is to meet with staff and kind of help them plan that procurement, walk with them through the process. After that comes, we let you obviously go out to tender and bids come in, you award the contract. After that, we'll come back in and check in and say, how did that go? What kind of responses did you get? What do we need to adjust? So we do keep, supporting throughout the whole process.
I think too, Mayor Richmond, is that you don't have to do GHGs and local employment and apprenticeships and First Nations relations. I think that's where, we as a council focused on a few key things for us in the short term as a place to start, because we knew we couldn't do everything. People weren't ready for us to do everything. So we do have communities where they've chosen employment for underrepresented members of their community, whether First Nations, women, or visible minorities. So that is their focus. And other people are focused on living wage and other people, so what is it that your community would value and your council? And that's kind of what BCSPI staff would work with your staff and council to get to that starting point. What makes sense for us? What do we have coming up on the procurement sort of runway where we could test this, where it would make sense and we could achieve one of the key things in our OCP or our climate action plan, what have you?
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any more questions, so thank you very much to both of you. You're right, the presentation second time around, way better. You're getting better at this, Rob. Good job. No, thanks very much to both of you. Much appreciated. I think there's a lot of great value here, so we'll be discussing it, and I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
That's great. Thanks for giving us the time on the agenda.
All right, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
This is something that's been of great interest to me for a while, as I've tested staff a little bit with it too. I personally feel that there's some good opportunity here for us to lead by example in terms of how we do social procurement and how we do our business on a day-to-day basis. Always recognizing our staff capacity, realizing that we might be able to go there, or we should be able to go the pace we need to go. I'm quite interested in looking at this a little further. I don't know if anybody else is, and if so, we want to either have a motion or just refer it to budget time, whether we want to sign up for this, but what does everybody think?
My only comment would be is, as I asked before, staff have time to kind of review this in its entirety to see what opportunities are available as far as the training, the procurement opportunities. When they talked about purchasing, I imagine that would go back to our operations manager. Is that correct? I mean, has he had a chance to see this?
Nobody has. And in fact, I would really want my manager of finance to be very much involved. If we're updating purchasing policies, that falls under finance, but also a manager of operations who would be part of those larger projects and putting out RFPs and that. We haven't had any, this is the first sort of information that we've had on this. We haven't.
One of the questions you're asking would be answered through that process. The training opportunities, we have no idea what
those are. I like this idea. I think this is great. If we can leverage these communities and use this to our advantage to, provide local jobs, buy locally, I think that's all we've talked about a lot of this council table is supporting our community from a council point of view. And I would definitely like to see staff review this and come back to us with a report of what they think. Because we can see the scratch the surface and go from there, but I'd definitely be willing to hear what your managers have to say as well.
I'm not sure we would be able to review it unless we joined in and paid the $500. Because they would most likely say, we've done all this work, we want to get some money for it. I would say just from a staff perspective, like we wouldn't be able to start right away. I would like to give the manager an opportunity to come in and then we would look at putting them in where it goes on the work plan.
Yeah, I think of those, I mean, those are really good questions, Councillor Zep, but I don't think we can answer them. Right. I think the idea is, do we want to go down this road for $500, see what it's like, have staff go through that process? They could turn around 3 months ago. It's actually a lot more work than they let on, or we don't, or we, it doesn't suit us here, or whatever. That could potentially happen. I think more it's whether we want to spend $500 and a little bit of staff time to start down this road to see if it takes us the place we want to go.
Yeah. So that would lead me to my next question, if I may. So that $500 with what you've seen right now, do you feel that $500 is worthwhile to spend to have your staff be able to review this and then come back?
I think
because I
all
can't.
I see is work right now, so it might not be the best time to ask me, but
Kind of what I was trying to say as well is that does your staff even have the time?
not right now, but in 6 months, that's something maybe. But also, will we finish the climate action plan? Will that have some deliverables that we can then feed into this? It also said deliverables from the OCP. Pretty sure we don't want to wait 2 years on that, but there's probably going to be not the perfect time to embark on this, but there's got to be a better time so that we're not waiting too long. I think I'll have a better idea in probably like a month. I know Ms. Pedrini is starting to wrap up finalizing the climate action plan. We're going to be seeing that coming back here. That would be one big hurdle. And then again, just looking at work plan with staff.
So would that be better to review in 6 months?
Ultimately, I don't think $500 is going to make or break us. I wouldn't even probably put that through a budget. It could just go through our consultants because we have a general amount that we typically would have for these types of initiatives. So yeah, I think I just can't answer that right now, but I mean, in a few months' time, is that something that we can definitely review? I think
the point is it worth $500 at this point to start the process, have staff when they are able to start this process, see what kind of pace we can or can't go through it at and whether the value is there for us. It's not like Nikki's not going to be able to answer the good questions.
Yeah.
She can't answer any of those until we're into the process. And I think it's more a matter of, well, we'll wait 6 months till we have more time. I think it's something that's important to council that we initiate it. We put it on her heap, and if we can decide when, or CL Gilmore could decide when and how it gets initiated. And again, as Robert said, we can go through our pace. So maybe, I don't think we can start this in 6 months. Well, here's step one. What does that look like? Hey, you got a couple hours next week, Ms. Pedrini, go on that discussion. And it's something we would walk ourselves through at a pace that the CDO can manage. I got Councillor Noble waiting patiently there.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a great initiative. I don't know how soon we'd be able to embark on that, but I think it definitely sounds like a worthwhile initiative. And for the price, I'd like to see it brought back at budget session.
Do we need to bring $500 back in budget session, or something if there is interest here, we could just support at the table now? I don't think $500 is going to sway our budget one way or another.
Well, we couldn't get lunch paid for. So I don't think we got $500 to spend.
I paid for my own lunch, put that in.
There you go. Any thoughts on this side of the table? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's really worthwhile, even if we don't embark on it now, just having some communications, start considering these things, something like that. So I think $500 for 10 hours of consulting would be pretty valuable. I do think that in our small community, though, the chances of hitting off those things I said, so minorities and greenhouse gases and just along those, I think we might end up focusing in a few areas, but that's okay. I think it's good just to have a lens we're looking through,
Again, I think that's why I asked the question of Karen, Mary Elliott. I think it sounds like, depending on the type of project, we could customize. So, because I agree with you, we're too small to be able for a contractor to come in. And if she'd said they were further down the line, my follow-up question to Karen was going to be, have you found that local contractors are getting edged out of the big contracts because they can't tick off all those boxes that you just said? So it sounds like as we go down through the process, we'd be able to customize and go, okay, we're building the following. Local contract is the top criteria. Well, and this one, GHG is the top criteria, you know, and coming from our OCP and coming from those principles, but sounds like we can kind of customize it to that as well. Because I agree, there's no way in a town our size with our contractors that they'll be able to hit all the marks.
Yeah, so I support it.
I think for me, the biggest concern is taking a look at who we've hired recently and the lack of municipal experience and taking over budget right at the same time. I think that person's going to be taking 6 months to get caught up on what's going on and putting the budget together and making it ready for approval in May. I think to add this on at this time is an awful lot to ask for. I'm interested in the whole idea. I think it's worth the $500, but I'm just not so sure, as Nikki has said, that how much time have we got in between with the new staff that we've got. So and we're in the hiring process for another 1 or 2 positions. So I'm not against the $500, but I don't know how far we're going to get into this until maybe the summer next year.
That leads to that kind of leads to my question, is that if this is $500 over a annual period, so like Ted said, and like you as well said, with your low workload, if we said we want to start this tomorrow, you said yourself, you may not be able to actually look at it for 4 or 5 months. So what I'm getting at is that if we say in 6 months, we say, okay, Nikki, now please sign up for this. Will that give the opportunity to start it within a couple of days? Because my fear is that if we pay for a 12-month subscription, when you don't get started for 6 months, we just wasted that 6 months.
No, I think that we wouldn't register until we were ready to go.
That's what I was.
And
trying
then
to
we
get
would
at.
see, I mean, if we're anywhere of 6 months into next year, and regardless, it's $500. So even if we were to start in, I'm not saying November next year, but whether we started in May or we started in November, it's $500. I think we could manage that. But I wouldn't recommend signing up until we actually had some time to put into it, because I feel as though we go, okay, we're ready. We're going to figure out a plan, pull the trigger, and then really start into it.
I mean, my comments on that is we're doing a lot of hand wringing over $500 here, and whether it crosses a 6 months period or not. Yeah, $500 to me gets us started. I would say start us tomorrow. Have that initial conversation. You then, I agree with Ted, your staff might not be able to. I'll leave that in your hands. That's not for us to speculate. I'm not going to decide when your managers are able to do what. Let's start the process. We can go at the pace we need to go, is what they're telling us. Maybe the first step can happen tomorrow. Maybe it's a 1-hour meeting that plants some seeds in the mind of our development and our operations manager or whatever. You know what I mean? Maybe that's just the starting point, and then they go, okay, yeah, the next one's a little longer, and we can't get to that for 6 months or whatever it is. But my point is, I feel like we're breaking this down into too many small parts here. $500 over 12 months, 16 months, you know. To me, I'm interested in it because I think it represents a direction I would like us to go, which is a social, environmental, and locally, you know, supportive direction in terms of how we do business. I think if we do it as a corridor, it also amplifies our ability, as you know, for all of us to go down this road. You know, if it was just us on a little island, yeah, it's worth it for sure. But, you know, like we said, we only have so much buying power here in our little town. If this is something that we look at collectively through the corridor, I think it changes the way we all do business. And I think it's something that we can lead by example in terms of how we approach these sorts of things. So I'm very interested in it. I would leave timing and all that up to Nikki, and the CEO can figure out how that goes. But I think the question is, as a group, it sounds like, do we feel that this is a worthwhile endeavor, worthwhile expenditure of $500? And if so, we'll leave it in staff's hands to navigate from there.
I would support it for sure.
Okay. So would somebody like to make that motion then? And shall we sign on to the ECSPI?
Committee of the whole recommend.
Okay, but are we gonna-
recommend.
But if we go to sign on, like I probably won't be able to look at this for months, serious. So say we support signing on. I just have a long list of things that are way before I can even get to any new projects. And that would be me taking the lead, and I don't want to take the lead in the fact that we're just about to hire new people. We already have, our purchasing policy says our preference is to buy local. Number one, that's been years in the making, as best as our abilities. We've now expanded our RFPs to have certain requirements for hiring Indigenous peoples. And so we're already starting to some elements. Again, I don't know what we would have from a GHG footprint or climate initiative, because we're not quite finished that yet. But I know we already have a couple of things that we rank some of our larger projects on. And again, I think we're lucky because we have a lot of companies in town who can help with some of the groundwork. We're doing roads and that type of thing. But say, for example, our soccer fields, we didn't have anyone who could do the soccer fields. So we have the same person come back, which was a successful bid ultimately, but they knew the place they could get it done faster. They'd already been here. They knew some of the players to hire locally. So, I hear what you're saying, and I think that we are implementing some of those things, but there'll be more that I don't even know if we're ready to embark yet on.
It's because we don't know.
Well, also plus the climate stuff. Like, I think that's one thing I know that this table has been really wanting to see come to, the final product of that. But I'm just saying, I think signing on, I don't know if you want to say that we pursue this, but I mean, signing on tomorrow, then we're just going to be,
Sure.
maybe it's semantics, but
And again, I'm pushing back, but not hard. I hear you, totally hear you. You've got other priorities and other lists ahead. To me, this feels like something that can get incorporated into some of those processes. So the only part of what you said that I resist is, I'm going to put it down here. When I check all these others off, I'll get to that. To me, if this is something that can be talked about with, and it's not just manager finances, it's public works and other departments, for whoever would be, part of that training, the early part of that training. And if it's, I want to wait for my manager finance to be well set, that's fine too.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I feel like it's something that would be an ongoing thing. And if we sign on in a month or whatever it is, and it takes a while and we have to spend another $500 the next year to do it again, that's fine. But I feel like it's something that once we got into the process would be incorporated naturally as we move along. And again, I would not push back in terms of, you say, so-and-so doesn't have time for that 3-hour seminar until May. Then I believe you. I just don't want to put it on a shelf and say, oh, we're going to get to that. And then when I ask you about it in 6 months, you go, yeah, but then remember we had this other thing that came up, because that's what happens a lot to us. To me, this is something that could be done. Let's start it. And as you understand the workload for your staff, you make all those decisions. Carte blanche, obviously, that's a million decisions made. I just don't want to see it parked over here and go, we'll sign up for that when we're ready. Let's sign up for it sooner, not tomorrow, but then I'll leave you. But that's what I say, I'm pushing back, but not super hard. Let's look at see, because I don't think we know what it looks like. We just got a vague idea of what your first step would be for your staff. Is it an hour meeting? Is it 1 hour meeting that starts this thought process and then we can consider it? I don't know. If it is, let's have the 1 hour.
I don't have an hour is what I'm trying to tell you.
And that's fair. That's
Okay, to hire is going to be all the energy that I need to get people in. And so that's one of the things that I don't think I can compromise. And again, I'm not going to go, this strategy, this needs to be done. I know that this has been something we've talked about probably for 3 years, at least, maybe 4. And I know it's something that we collectively want to move ahead with. So I know the importance of it. I'm saying right now,
okay,
I don't have it. Okay.
So go ahead.
I was just going to say sort of similar to Mike, is that the website that you get access to might just have a lot of materials to look at stuff. And so that would be one reason for not signing up in like 6 months or a year, just to like look and say, look at this. So yeah, I encourage you to set your own work schedule.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to risk it. Like if this was a $5,000 sign up, I'd go, don't sign up until you're ready to go. it's $500 and it can provide you some value, and we have to cross over again in next year, so be it. I'm willing to risk $250 because we didn't start for a few months. Other than that, I just don't want to see it go away again. And then we'll talk about, we're never gonna have capacity
No.
to do all the
This is
stuff we want to do.
This is different than the last presentation we had.
Yes.
And so the fact that there's the templates, the training, like I see the difference from what there was before. There wasn't a lot of this, wasn't a lot of buy-in, and there's been a lot of work since that time.
Mhm.
Because it was basically had a consultant coming in and we were having to start fresh and from scratch. And I definitely see this as a different project that was. So I can see it will be easier.
So
I guess from my perspective is I know what I'm like. If I get something new up here and it's paid for and it's on the shelf, it's weighing on me all the time because I've got all these other things ahead of it. And there's an expectation from council, let's be fair, if we go ahead and do this, we're going to be asking questions. And every time we do that, we're putting Nikki on the spot because she said right up top, it's way up here. And there's all this to do in between. So I think you're being pretty honest by saying you don't have time to do it right now. So sure, we can spend the $500 and join, but I can't see that I have any expectations of Nikki or her staff coming to us in 3 months or 6 months with any updates. So how we go about that, I'm gonna leave it to the administrator because I don't mind the $500. That's never been an issue for me. I don't want to see something new come along that sits on the shelf because we just can't get to it because we don't have the abilities.
No, and I agree with all those statements. I guess my thought is this isn't a project. This is something that aids in our work. This is something that we change. It's something that we bring into the way we do business as opposed to let's tackle this new project. Climate Action Plan was a project. It's something that will inform how we do business as well, but it was a big job at its own for us to go after and develop. This is something I think that assists our work as we do business, as opposed to prioritize list of projects. This one's down here. That's why I don't want to see it get shelved until we're ready that way. Like Amika says, you can get emails. There might be a little information that helps us now. We don't know what this looks like. For $500, I would like to start it soonish, whenever. I won't put a date on it, soonish, and see how it can infiltrate its way into our work plan. 100% get that, amongst all the other competing priorities, in terms of how much time. If you're like, this takes more time than it felt like in the presentation, you prioritize it just like you always do wherever you see fit. I just see it as a tool rather than a project. And so if we can approach it as a tool, let's see what that looks like. Let's explore it. That's all I'm asking, is that we explore it on your timeline. No benchmarks to, like I'm not, the expectation isn't any bigger than that. It's just to like explore the tool, see if it can assist in our work. If it's a tool that takes a heck of a lot of time for us now, well, maybe we won't be able to go down that path properly for a while. We'll spend $500. That's sort of the way I'd like to approach it, not as let's get on this now.
Okay.
I have other let's get on it now.
I know you do.
So if we could entertain a motion that let's not put dates or anything like that on it, just that staff sign us up for the BCSPI. I was going to say when it's time, but not even. Sign us up and you figure out when it makes sense. Is that fair? Again, I don't.
Yeah, no, that works.
Yeah.
Yep.
Everybody good with that approach?
I won't support it. No, I think the timing is wrong with the staff we've got and budget coming up and everything. I would prefer $500 again. I'm going to say that's not an issue with me. It's just the workload, and I don't see us having time for that till next March or April, maybe even May. So I'm just seeing some frazzled people working here, and I don't want to add to any more of that. And if we go with this COVID thing, that's going to add even more pressure. So anyway, that's good.
There hasn't been one made yet, but there would be a recommendation to council from the whole if somebody makes that motion. But I don't think one's been made yet. Would anybody like to make that motion? Or a motion, sorry. Leah, Council Noble, go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we join this initiative. Just not sure what date to put on it.
Yeah, let's not put a date on it. Let's leave that up to the CAO. Okay, moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zan. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Opposed? Motion carries.
So that will come forward at the regular meeting,
Okay.
at the next regular meeting.
Motion to adjourn committee of the whole.
Yep.
Second by Ryan, all in favor. Adjourned. Anybody need a second or can we roll right in?
We're gonna just let people leave the meeting. We are going on.
Okay, so I'm going to reopen the regular council meeting. And the rise with report is from in camera today is that the motion was that staff, or the resolution is that staff seek a legal opinion with respect to village permanent liabilities related to roaming horses. And that staff reach out to our SPCA, RCMP, and MOTI for potential solutions, guidance, and resources, and that the MLA and SLRD be CC'd on the letter to MOTI. I think I got that right. Yeah, moved by Councillor Zat, second by Councillor Antonelli. Any opposed?
Just
Discussion, go ahead.
Just a question. I wonder if we should CC that to Laurent Nation. I'll just leave that open for discussion.
Let's talk to them. I guess we'll probably talk before that letter gets written anyway. I don't know, thoughts?
I think it'd be good to talk to him before it gets written.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Yep. Okay, we'll leave the motion as is. Moved by Councillor Zat, second by Councillor Antonelli. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then I'll look for a motion to adjourn the regular council meeting. Councillor Antonelli, second by Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.